Do you need me to level set? Can you hear us? We're good? All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. I want to take the opportunity, first of all, to thank everybody for being here. I know our accommodations are a little small, but I think it was intentional on behalf of Ken to look at an opportunity for us not to be able to move away from each other. We really need, so the focus here is about leaning in. The strategic plan was developed a number of years ago. It had come up in my conversations with all of you. It has come up in conversations with new board members who are coming to the room. And it's an opportunity for us to take a look at where we are and then level set moving forward. Because I think some things have changed about our school district. We certainly have gone through a COVID crisis. We've now been through a hurricane. We've shared data related to, and part of this will be some of the data shared this morning. And then an opportunity today for us to work through sort of the big buckets, vision, mission, values. Then the goal would be to get a little bit of homework thought, not homework thought in preparation for the next retreat, which will get more into key performance indicators and talk about what board expectation is, which then sets my motion, which is already in motion with my cabinet, related to how are we going to reach those goals, and then provide proposed measures to you of how we'll demonstrate that we're reaching. Thank Dr. Dean Leon, who's here today to help sort of process with us and introduce him. You met him recently at a board briefing or workshop where he sort of proposed what his plan was. So I want to thank you for being here.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Bernier. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to stand, even though we're in this snug room, and I think it's going to be a great room for us to be productive and just connect with and listen and hear one another and share ideas. The way that Chris and I are going to facilitate, and we'll have Chris introduce himself shortly, we're really going to lead you through a series of different exercises and activities to get you grounded, get you thinking, right, to ask questions, listen to one another. We're not making any decisions today, so much as generating ideas, right? And then, as Dr. Bernier said, some of that thought homework will be to consider what we want our priorities to be going into session number 2 when it's cabinet. So that's we're going to put a finer point on the strategic plan refresh, the priorities. But before
We
we
will need a different.
yeah.
I was like,
I was going to hold on to the end to keep it suspense. Sorry, I want to be 30 of us.
I want to have that information ready.
Okay. Before we dive into our data and some of the more tactical work that you're saying, let's ground ourselves in the purpose of your work, the children across the district. And what I ask you to do is really just to think of a child who means a lot to you and what you want to be true in this child. So write it down, think about it. Before we dive into
thank you so much. Thank you.
some of the practical work that you're saying, let's ground ourselves in the purpose of your work, the children across the district. And what I ask you to do is really just to think of a child who means a lot to you and what you want to be true in this child. So write it down, think about it.
Thank you.
Let's ground ourselves in I can hear from maybe 2 people who could share. Think of a child that means a lot to you. What would you like to be true in that?
Well, I have 2 grandchildren in the system right now, and I'd like to see them graduate and be prepared for whatever future path they decide, whether it's college or the workforce or whatever.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay.
I want him to be a happy, productive member of his community.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else want to share? Before we move on. Okay. We're going to come back to this child. Of course, this child's representative of all the children in the county, right? We want to make sure we're grounding ourselves in the future of all the learners across the community, and what we want to be true for them. So this is just, of course, a first exercise. We'll be digging into the data, we'll be considering feedback from students, from families, from different staff members across the district, in an effort to make these dreams come
A
true.
happy, productive member of his community.
So today, our purpose is threefold. As Dr. Brenner said, first, we'll take some time to reflect on the current state of the district, and then transition into envisioning what we want the future to look like. And that's going to be very much considering input from your community through surveys, through interviews of staff members, other data around performance and progress. We'll spend some time calibrating on the vision, mission, and values, so the strategic direction of the refresh plan. And then we'll begin to identify initial focus areas, so very broad buckets and categories of initiatives. So we won't get into initiatives today or specific metrics. If they do come up and we want to make sure we hang on to them, we have our parking lot here, so Chris and I, Chris number 1, or number 3, depending on the order, is going to be taking notes, or I'll be taking notes. We want to make sure we bring our good ideas back to the second session. Okay, we'll spend some time calibrating on the vision and the team. I've had the privilege of speaking with all of you and coming to the board briefing meeting as well, but I'm Justin DeLeon, I'll be one of your facilitators. And our colleague Lauren Schulten, she's not with us here in person today, but she has been working behind the scenes to help prepare. She's based in Louisville. And Chris,
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris. You can call me EE Chris or Chris 2. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Happy to be here this morning. I work for educational needs as well, and I work on the East Coast, the states and districts, mostly in strategic planning and academic recovery planning, a little bit with schools and districts, with data systems and designing transparent data systems that are easy to use for the public and for the students. And prior to joining Education Elements, I was a teacher and school leader in Mississippi and New York City, so very difficulty. The connection to Florida is I lived on the east coast of Florida as a child from West Boca Raton from 2nd grade to 8th grade. Very familiar with the state, and I studied here in the district, mostly in strategic planning and academic planning.
so our agenda packed in there, it's a little bit adapted from what you see in front of you. By that I just mean we added a break in the afternoon. That's pretty much it, 2-minute break. So we'll make sure that we have breaks for you, we have time to regroup, so we'll take a break around 10:30, break for about 45 minutes at lunch, and then again around 2 o'clock. And our goal is to wrap up by 3. We know that you have a meeting later today. Yes, sir.
Water, we put water on the table. There's also more water in the corner, so feel free to help yourself as well. Bathrooms are straight out in the left and the right, and the coffee is straight out. For future.
Okay, so we'll begin again with reflecting on the current state. We're going to do one more activity to get us grounded and to frame the day. Before lunch, our goal is really to just begin a conversation and think big and think bold about what we want the future to look like for those learners that you reflected on and thought about. We'll break for lunch, and when we come back, that's when we'll begin to lean into mission, vision, values, and then that will transition us into shaping initiative frameworks. All right, and this is just to recap. I shared this slide during the briefing meeting, but what our project is, yes, today, but also through May and then into June. This is about refreshing. We're not creating a brand new plan from scratch. It's about reflecting and adapting, which is really the work that we're digging into today. Instead of maintaining and adding, although there may be several pieces of the current plan that you'd like to maintain. It's about prioritizing, which really we'll get into in session number 2. So between this session and session number 2, we'll begin prioritizing and then continue that work in May. And setting strategic directions, which is actually what we'll begin to do today. What our project is, yes, today. So today we're really focused on the top 3 levels, if you will, of the strategic plan house. So from priorities up. The majority of our time, we're really thinking at the mission and vision level. And then by later in the afternoon, we will get into being to identify priorities. Which really we'll get into in session number 2. And then today, of course, April 11th, we'll come back together in May for our second session, and that is when we'll be joined by the cabinet, so we're looking side by side to really go couple layers deeper. That's where we're gonna get into beginning to finalize priorities, your objectives underneath them, and key performance indicators tied to those. And then as they begin to come up to action, typically that's for the cabinet to run, right? Based on the direction that's set. And what you see here is just a very broad overview of what the approach is to engage these community and staff through this process. Okay? I know that on the left, that calendar is small, but we can share a link with you. That's just meant to represent the plan that we have in place. My team and I have been working with Dr. Savage to identify different touch points for different groups of staff members and advisory groups where we can get their input and feedback. So for example, today, what we're going to do is generate some new ideas for how we might adapt mission vision, for example, right? So what we'll do is we'll put that into a survey, we'll ask people to include the advisory groups to weigh in. Same thing with the cabinet, right? That will hold true as well with priority areas. So we get to surface a list, an initial list of priority areas. Again, we'll ask them to weigh in, share feedback, what's missing. So there's a cadence that we've established to do that, and then again, that will happen after May as much as possible. We know that their meetings are being closed by April, like early May. But this is the plan. Coming into today, we also had a chance to look at, we're going to dig into the accreditation surveys that have been happening. Quite a bit of responses. I mean, you can look at the counts on either screen, but know that that's very much influencing some of the thinking and the discussion today. One dimension is what are people saying? What are students saying? Elementary through high school, what are your families saying? What are staff members saying, right? And then we also have at the bottom our interviews. Of course, I interviews each of you. We interview chiefs, number of directors, right? Of course, Dr. Grenier. And so all of these different data points, right? All this input, that's all coming together today. So today is about reflecting on it, looking at it, synthesizing, right? Noticing context. Right? And then us also taking some next steps to actually just be thinking today, give it back to these same people who gave us input and help us to move forward together. Okay? And then we also have that's all my favor. Now, our first activity is going to be fun in this room. And this is our one activity like this. The entire day will be productive. Sorry. This is our activity that we're calling student. So that's what the book is called. And what I'm going to do is pass out a bunch of pictures. Okay? And then us also. People, I'm seeing some knowing nods, so I don't know if that means you've done this before or not, but we're going to find out. Okay. So I'm going to pass out a bunch of pictures. Your task, without talking, is to put them in order. Now, okay, about 30 pictures in this. So if you'll stand up or people can sit, but I'm going to pass out some pictures. If you pass them out right there. Pass them out down there. One piece. Yeah, one piece. And then you're going to be more. Keep passing it around until the piles are gone.
Oh, okay.
The puzzle, right? So what you're going to want to do is once we have all the pictures out, right? As a group, you have to put the pictures in order. So keep passing them out until they're all out. Keep passing them out. Everyone should probably have like maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4. Yeah, Chris. Yeah. Alright, so you have all these pictures. So you might, I'll give you some initial guidance that I'm going to be fine. So I see you starting to lay them out. Okay. So using some nonverbal cues, start to work together to put them in 3 or 4. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that now without talking. Yeah, Chris. Alright, so you have all these pictures. So you might, I'll give you some initial guidance that I'm going to be fine. So I see you starting to lay them out. Okay. So using some nonverbal cues, start to work together to put them in 3 or 4. give you a second clue. They're really just linear, right? So they would go in order, which you're starting with these usually. Okay, our silent minute is up. Now you can talk if you'd like to.
Okay, these are the shifts.
Where's the beach?
Yeah.
You have chicken, right?
Yeah.
She has,
Yeah.
Beach stuff.
I have the
Where's
cruise
the rest
ship
of
or chicken.
you have part of the cruise ship?
Anybody have anything on houses?
The cruise ship has to go
Is that
together.
this?
That's the postcard to
No,
the
it's
cruise
like
ship.
these red houses.
Here's the planet.
Where's the rest of the beach stuff?
I got,
There.
I got some beach. Here's beach.
Our silent minute is up. Now you can talk.
Like that's a beach also there.
Huh?
Who has other spaces?
Oh, is that what, yeah.
Where's the beach?
Here's more,
That's
here's
sort of
more
going
beach.
to,
That's what that is?
Maybe.
going to the ship. Where's the ship? This
I've
ship.
got the ship.
Okay, that's going to the ship because it's.
2 more minutes.
Planet.
All right. How about somebody flying an airplane? You got an airplane?
Outside?
Yeah, I have one like that.
I'll take cruise ship.
I think it's an airplane.
Because the one of them has a cruise ship has it. There you go, perfect.
And then,
Desert.
That's a beach.
Sorry,
That's the
Sorry.
beach, right?
This is the view out of the airplane. Look.
So cute. That is a view out of the airplane. It
took
looks like
me
this.
how about somebody flying an airplane?
So he's working this one. That's
It's not a puzzle, it's not a puzzle that fits
Oh, yeah, that's the same
together.
girl.
Correct.
I think it's an airplane.
All these go together.
It's a sequence.
They're looking at this.
Sequence.
And they're looking
Down
at
that
this.
way.
Okay, they're looking at that.
Sequence. All right. Well, how about the guy, you want the guy that flies the
Zooms
airplane?
in, right? Zoom, tighter, 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 tighter.
So we fly there, fly together the line, but
And
it's
then-
sticking out.
Yeah. He goes up into space.
Sky. Yeah, here.
Anything else with a rooster?
This is above the airplane.
Oh, I'm sorry, what's that?
This is the baby planet.
That goes, oops, sorry. So it zooms in.
This is how he's doing. We're flying the.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's seeing the island.
He's seeing the
That's
island.
Here.
Yeah,
Well, how about the guy, you want the guy that flies the
Zooms
airplane?
in, right? Zoom. Oh, very
and that's up in the moon.
Yeah, okay.
So there we go.
He goes up into space. Well, these guys are the same, so.
The other babies come over here. This is-
No,
this-
he's with the toys, but he might be on the
He
beach
might be over here.
No,
before.
he's on our boat, he's on our boat.
Yeah, but all that goes together.
Some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's on the boat.
It shows there.
See, there he is,
That
right
goes
there.
and then
That's him.
just keep going.
All right.
Look
Take
at,
your
oh,
last 10 seconds.
Yeah,
There you go. Yep, it's very close.
yeah.
Okay, where's this?
But you see the guy is looking at the airplane on that. But they have to get the right plane.
I think,
and
yeah.
they get on the bus and they get on the
the
boat.
buses, the two buses.
Fly,
The
Take it to
buses,
us.
then they get on the
that,
boat.
that
bus-
big cruise ship is on the bus. Does that make sense?
Yes.
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 So,
See, there he is, right there.
you have it, nope.
It's there and then there. You keep going.
All right.
And then they send it
Take your last 10 seconds.
Yeah.
There you go.
This makes
So-
sense.
Australia.
Okay, no, this makes sense, because this goes here, this is that,
This is your bus.
The planet probably goes.
Oh, there's.
So I'm gonna start leaning here, right? So really, it begins with the head
Of
of
the
Chris, who is in the ad, right? Dr. B, you were saying exactly that. In the ad,
so.
right, on the cruise ship, which is on the side of the bus, okay? And in the sake of time, I won't read everything, but you had different permutations where you have the clusters, right?
Okay, no,
Right?
this makes sense, because this goes.
And
here.
the ad on the side of the bus is being watched on TV, right? So you see that. So the ad on the side of the bus is the cruise ship, right? And it's flying, then you see the pilot flying overhead, and then we're zooming out from there into outer space,
Yep.
right? So this would be,
That's the thing.
this would be the end, right? Which the team had at one point,
And
right?
then we send a card.
And in the same time.
Is that what the
That's,
end?
yeah, that's the postage stamp, right? So really like the postage stamp you're zooming out from there. So there's a chicken, postage stamp, desert, right? The airplane,
Yeah.
and then you're in
The
outer
Earth,
space.
yeah.
You see that?
Thank you for indulging us in that and taking a few minutes to dive in.
I love it. It's live stream.
The team had it at one point, right? That's the postage stamp, right? Really like postage stamp, we're zooming out. So I've done that activity with elementary school students to a corporate retreat, and the differences in how things play out, it's telling. But great activity to do with kids, and also get us started here this morning. And we wanted to just do a quick reflection on why we started with that. So you'll see our 3 guiding questions here. Thinking about what worked and what didn't work in your approach. So your personal approach to that activity plus maybe the team's approach. Number 2, how does the concept of Zoom relate to our work today? How it connects. And then in what ways might this exercise reflect your work? And the differences in how things play out, it's telling. Take a couple seconds to great activity to do with kids. Jot down some notes or consider your thoughts. And would love if you 2 or 3 people could just share out, you can pick a question, let me answer all 3 questions. So good to you. So you'll see.
So I think that, it's harder to work together when you're not speaking. So when we're speaking and working together collectively.
How does the concept of Zoom relate to
Absolutely.
today?
I thought it interesting that we decided,
And then in what ways?
without saying anything initially, that we were working on our own separate pieces. I didn't get the concept of media being a whole linear. Like we were all sort of choosing up sides of who has an island, who has a planet. And yet it was all, that works all connected to each other.
So I think.
Anyone consider how this is connected to our work that we're about to jump into? You, Dana, and jumping into the team?
Just being able to see, the big picture first and then working our way to get there, the pieces of the puzzle to get to the big picture.
We were working on our own separate pieces. I didn't get the concept of media being.
We are communicating non-verbally,
We were all sort
even when
of
we are
choosing up
communicating
sides of
orally.
who has an island, who has a planet.
And my crossed arms means I'm cold, that doesn't mean I'm closed off to the process. I just want you all to know that, but.
Anyone consider how this is connected to our work? Oh, go ahead.
Kind of just looking at this, it's about perspective, I guess. The whole thing was perspective.
Just being able to see, the
Perspective
big
and
picture
to some extent,
first
strategic
and then working our way
planning
to
doesn't
get
come with a
the
box top.
pieces. to get to the-
Given a larger picture and asking us to put it together or match what we see would have been easier. Strategic planning doesn't come with that box top either, so they're kind of have to go to different views, different perspectives.
And my
All that
crossed
mature
arms
stuff.
means I'm cold, that doesn't.
And I think that's a good connection piece, Dr. Related to the work today, we're looking to see the whole picture as best as we can. Now, we know in this room, that given the 10 or 12 of us, we're not the whole picture, but we're gonna try to use our data, the interviews that we've collected, your thoughts, to try to view Lee County's whole picture, and then maybe determine some priorities based on that. So we like to start with that activity, to just, like you said, consider perspective. And work as a team today to make sure we're broadening our perspective as much as possible and really pushing each other throughout the day as needed. I think that's a good connection. And so with that, we are going to jump into theme statement. Now we know. And the way we're going to run the next portion of our day, you'll see it broken down into 3 different sections. So in a moment here, we're going to get you to jump in to some current state data. We're going to give you some time to process, do some independent analysis, and then we'll have some team sharing where you'll see some things around the room that we'll be using throughout the day. And so that'll be our first part. Then Justin's going to jump into a section where we're going to jump into Lee County's growth and evolving demographics and how that also plays into our priorities and decisions that we're making. And then our last part is we're going to consider the future workplace conditions and the implications for learners. So as we jump in to all the changes happening throughout our society, how does that impact our learners and our teachers and our school leaders? Analysis, and then we'll have
Right, so
some sharing.
perhaps obvious, but it's just playing off of the idea of Zoom, right? So starting very much in the district, in the schools, zooming out to the county, zooming out to national and global workforce and considerations.
And then, any questions about the breakdown of the direction? implications for the message. So as we jump in, and so we like to use this visual to kind of give a sense of the perspective that we are going to get today, that we're going to jump into in May, and then that broader perspective we're looking towards. So we broke up our input into 3 different constituents. You have us here today, the board superintendent, you have the cabinet, and you have stakeholders. So you'll see today with the data we're going to present, the data you're going to jump into and analyze with your colleagues, that is going to bring in the input from the folks we have in the room here, plus our stakeholders throughout the district. So we like to use this students, parents, families, staff perspective. So that'll be today. And then in May, as Justin mentioned, we're going to bring in the cabinet to gain their perspective, and that will bring us to that middle point where we can gather perspective from all our constituents within the district. So that's our ultimate goal as we approach May. So you'll see today with the data we're going to present, the data you're going to present to and so with that, as Justin mentioned, we wanted to let you all jump into some data. And before we have some copies here that we're going to pass out to you all that you can mark up and you'll have a chance to discuss. But within this packet, you'll see a couple different things. Number one, there'll be student achievement data. So there'll be math, ELA, graduation rate, and a couple other metrics that we will bring us to that middle point. There's also stakeholder surveys that we pulled from educators in the district, students, and families. And then the last piece you'll see as we get further into the morning is the interview and perception data. It is going to be anonymous in the data that you see, so you'll just see the title of the position who said the comment. It is based on interviews with board members, superintendent, and chiefs. So that encompasses all the data that we'll be jumping into today. So it'll be math, ELA, graduation rate. And here's a quick breakdown. We'll probably adjust a little bit of the time and considerations, but those will be our benchmarks. So the first thing we're going to do is let you all jump into our district data set. So that includes the academic data and the surveys from parents, families, educators, and students. We're going to spend about 15 minutes letting you all jump into that. Justin will pass out some copies that you can mark up and take a look at. Then we'll do a quick discussion and see if anything's standing out to us. Then we'll move into round 2. We'll pass out another data set, and we'll talk about the interview and perception data. Same process, we'll give you a chance to look through it, jump into anything that's standing out to you, and then discuss the topics. And then our final culminating activity is going to be a protocol called Start, Stop, Tweak, Continue. That's where we're going to take in the data from the district, plus our interview data, and try to come up with some things that we potentially want to start, stop, tweak, or continue, and we'll give some more framing as we get closer to that protocol. Any high-level questions about the breakdown or the 3 rounds of data review? Final piece of framing, and this is just something to help capture ideas. As you're going through the data, I see a couple folks already jumping in. Feel free to mark it up, use your pen, and just be thinking of this quick protocol, circle, try, and square. So anything that might help us align our focus areas moving forward, or any data point you want to bring up in that conversation, feel free to circle that. Anything that you want to explore further, whether it's in conversation, whether it's bringing it up to a colleague, go ahead and put a triangle around that. And then anything that squares with your beliefs, or anything that you feel really strongly about that you want to bring up to the broader group, go ahead and put a square around that.
Part of what we'll do especially for try, if you want to explore further, if we need to dig into more data, and there's like a deeper line of inquiry that we need to follow up on between now and next time, we'll certainly do that, if not today.
So we're going to give everyone about 10 minutes to just take a look. Let us know if you have any questions or you think of anything, and then we will jump in. 2 more minutes. We know there's a lot there, so there'll be more time throughout the day. About 2 more minutes, and we're gonna jump into a quick conversation.
What's the cutoff? Do you know what that number is? Seasoning. This is for families, for family survey. Excellent, thank you.
So that is time for that section. We completely understand there's still a lot of folks jumping through that data. And so by all means, you can continue to do so. We do want to spend about 2 minutes just jumping into a quick conversation with a table partner. And so we have about a group of 9, so if we need a group of 3, that's also fine. But just quickly checking in with your table partner. You can use this protocol to help guide the conversation, but something that was circling around your brain as you jumped in, something that you may want to explore further, or something that's squared with your beliefs. We'll spend about 2 minutes, and feel free to jump into conversation.
Oh, hey, Armor. What'd you square and
Thing jumped out to me the most was high school, over half found it boring.
Yeah, so I
That
wrote
was-
that down in middle and high, and the cross difference between
So she's
elementary
squared.
interest in learning versus middle and high.
That's where that,
We are
that
going
house,
to be,
the,
which one bring,
at the
bring learning
college
experience
career.
to kids
How
that are
we
older
are
and make it
achieving
applicable to what
higher,
they're
I think
interested
we
in.
could really emphasize on that a lot.
Along that, I picked
So I think
out
that's-
on the same thing, lessons that made me want to learn about sex.
Yeah.
Elementary was 74%, and high
Yeah.
school was
Not
50%.
super much, but it's still
So
better.
that, so you
Yeah.
don't want to learn.
I agree with last page.
Well,
Well, that's the first page.
The other thing I noticed is all of
I
them
also was
are
trying
rated
to
same.
think too.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting.
Not number 1 is number 2, right up
I
there.
noticed it was taken on March 31st, survey.
Right.
I wonder, so, like,
100%.
What's interesting to me is they use the word warm and welcoming, welcoming guy and everything.
Yeah, to the things start really getting more intense for them, like,
Put a big
Which is to me
triangle.
kind of hand in warm.
I feel like that.
They would be close.
Maybe the kids just didn't understand the
Yeah, I
difference.
noticed that though.
I thought the culture part was interesting, where 14
Little kids are cute.
Oh, I know, I circled that. Why, I would love to know why, the kid, look, I would love to know why 800 people think it's secret in our institution. And that's from families, no, that's from the educators survey.
I always did
Thought that was really interesting.
Now, as far as the academic.
So what did you
I was surprised we're like pretty much
Well,
right
mine
with
is
the
safety.
average.
I mean, the safety.
I know,
I see
except it's
that,
aggravating.
well, I thought it was
Always
interesting
like,
that
Yeah.
kids think,
I
in
mean,
high
this
school,
year,
when born, you know, the.
this year's everybody was hit with COVID.
That's kind of high for boring.
This
I
particular
was
year,
totally boring.
we were seeing such a low
In the elementary school, kids have the same.
No, I wouldn't have.
I thought non-English.
I know. But that, I know, but how do you make it more exciting for those who want to be gay?
There were 75%.
I had safety squared.
Yeah, me too.
And I had, what did I have? I had, digital.
So many
Digital
other companies
readers,
like this
yeah.
count it, but they don't.
Yeah, me, I want.
Yeah, 48 and 23.
This one we may always have a hard time
See how the digital
increasing,
tools are working.
but the other one we should be able to get up close.
This was
So for this one, I was,
For the high school, I thought all of them, because
Yeah.
it was like preparing for my future, you know, the lessons, what they need to know.
Just meaning more headed towards extending educational career.
Or they have a certificate,
So when you do
just
that,
go into, tech or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how, what is that mechanism?
Yeah, because those really are genuinely positive responses.
right,
This right here is always from the teacher's point of view, like,
did you hear what she
this right here
said?
is frustrating.
No, I can.
So-
I added
really
the
need to
first
start
three
shifting
in each
that
box.
like,
Because
level
Yeah.
four,
those were three.
this is
Oh.
part of
Those are all
This is
positive.
but this is not.
Yeah, well, and I thought it was interesting that they were higher, like,
Oh, elementary, right?
And same goes for the other stuff, like how do we get more students to be more?
High scoring items.
but because when I was looking at
Just
the
that
absolutes
shift.
were given.
And I, you know, I had
This
those
one bothered me future together, because I mean, we knew about
Yeah.
it. Still, we
Yeah.
made mistakes, so I mean, that's.
Yeah.
The others, I think, I mean, those are positive
And
responses.
you
It's not
we
the
have
right,
so many.
but
Use the
we're
right.
providing something
Yeah.
they need in each of those categories.
Compared to.
that's
Right around top of
the
that.
other
But then again,
Connection between the two.
we're the same demographics as color.
Right. And that's
correct.
And that's correct.
There was a central, they were fours.
You know?
The majority of them were like all fours.
Yeah.
And I don't
You
know,
know
I don't know
what,
if
she
it's
said that
four
when
or
each of
five
these
jobs.
green sheets, the majority of them were fours,
I thought it was interesting.
except
Or
for middle and high
teachers
school.
talking about warm and warm.
Yeah.
Approaching
Be doing a
four.
better job bringing
And
them
then
up.
parents
Speed
were.
quicker.
Our kid, our elementary.
Yeah, our
And
parents
they're
in our
doing just as good a
elementary
job
were
with
pretty
everybody
close.
else.
Yeah.
And that was.
The other one
Yeah.
brings them
Some of
down.
that, 'cause I was like, they
I'm trying to
have-
define, I'm trying to define the one.
You guys need a number of these pages.
Yeah.
They were numbered, yeah.
Some of them are and some of them aren't.
All right, everyone, take about 15 more seconds. Oh,
There we go.
No, yes,
and then we're gonna come back to the group.
Yes.
But then it's easier to transcribe numbers and it's easier.
Who are these answers to?
Yeah,
What are they
exactly.
speaking on?
All right, everyone, we're gonna come back for a brief moment. If you would like to,
Who are the educators speaking? So the one that says educator, when they're talking about respectful, complacent, insecurity, upfront, who are they speaking on? So like, what is the,
The
are they
institution's
talking about
culture.
us as the board or
The institution's culture.
The respected school.
so the school itself?
so they're,
not that?
they're building. So before we jump into our next data set, we want to give you some processing time. So if you want to jot down any notes or anything you want to capture from your conversation with your partners, feel free to do that. Would also want to open up space for any questions, ideas, wonderings that are coming up amongst your small group that we want to share.
Well, I'm curious as to why we didn't see school-specific data. Because if we're starting zooming in and then going out, I would think looking at school-specific data would help us to identify schools that are doing things well, perhaps figuring out what they're doing and then replicate that elsewhere.
Great point. We're going to add that to our parking lot, so thank you for naming that.
Yeah, so we have access to it, and that's something that we can bring back.
The other aspect is we need to split middle school from high school data from students. And it would be interesting, so I'm wondering whether it would also help us to split, if possible, elementary, middle, and high school educators. So we get some congruence in
Yeah.
how they feel about the culture of their building.
Yeah.
Because in looking at, some things are very similar, like warm and safe seem to be things that move forward, but there also seems to be some incongruence, especially when you start talking about how kids learn and how kids feel they're learning and how teachers feel they're learning. it just seemed, I used a triangle, there seemed to be a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, you could have a couple of really bad cultures bringing all of this down.
The one thing I noticed was just the elementary kids all found school exciting,
Yeah,
and the middle and high
Yeah.
school found it boring, over
Right.
50% of them.
She said
And
you
again,
don't-
I would like to see it, or culture, whatever, I'd like to see that separated, maybe it's 80% of high school and only 40% of middle
Yes.
school, or is it like a really quick boom type thing?
I think you gotta talk to God about that, because you have to change teenagers in order to change that.
I was gonna say, that's a common trend you see almost everywhere, but worth noting, because it's
It
important.
just worries me when it gets over 50%.
Yes. So we mentioned this before, but Justin and I are capturing all these ideas, all these questions, all these next steps. It's all gonna be up here for us, to work with Dr. Savage after, our time today. But really good thoughts coming up already, so thank you for all that. Any other wonderings or questions coming up for our first round?
I'm wondering, I didn't hear it, did we not get there, or did we pause? I didn't get there, but I knew the numbers. Did we get to academic achievement levels? And we didn't,
Yeah,
we didn't have any conversation about that. Climate and other things, again, are really important. But when we look at proficiency, and I will redefine for all of you differently than the state defines proficiency. Proficiency is level 4 and 5. But I see children at level 3 as meeting grade level. So when I say proficiency, I'm talking about levels 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Also, our graduation rate that's been relatively flat, which may be due to some of the incongruence based upon what the adults think they're doing and what our children think we're doing, right? Just try to make the connection for us moving.
One thing that also stood out for our group is just for culture-wise is why is there 14% of
Thinking it's
staff thinking it's secretive,
secretive.
the culture?
That's alarming.
Yeah.
For their institution?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, on the data, we need to flip-flop it. We need to get our 4s and 5s where the state 4s and 5s are, and get our 1s and 2s where the state's 1s and 2s are, and then grow from there.
Well, in full transparency, when I first got here, with a lot of conversations with principals and educators about learning gains. There was a clear focus, and I heard phrases like this. With the type of children I get, the best I can hope for is to create learning gains. I won't espouse that to anybody, I don't think it's appropriate. But in the course of a year, the dialogue with our principals has changed. Learning gains grow out of looking for proficiency. When you're looking to get all kids to levels 3, 4, and 5, it brings the whole level of instruction up. Versus we were losing, if you looked at our data carefully, we were losing some of our 4s and 5s over the course of their career with us because we were not teaching that level of expectation. We were bringing it down in order, the idea of bringing in learning gains. That's not 100% yet by any means, but the dialogue has shifted into proficiency and instructional walks. Like today, I'm missing out, and rightfully so. We're all missing out on an opportunity to be at one of the elementary schools, watching the high school principals meetings that used to be, the principal meetings that used to be sit and gets down at the central office, which we could send in an email. This is how you do a fire drill, this is what's transpiring in the legislature. Now they're actually walking buildings, looking at instruction, providing positive feedback notes to teachers, then going back and sitting with the principal, giving them the sandwich, right? This is what's really good, this is how your classrooms felt, this is where you have potentially your school building work to do, and here's some other highlights, but the principal's getting honest feedback about the building. So the secretives bothered me, but I also looked at the number. So
Well, I will tell you,
818 out of 14,000 employees. I think that number would disturb me if it was bigger than that. it still bothers me that 818 people feel that way.
Well, and so do the parents, for some
I
reason.
didn't get a chance to look
That
at
was very,
parent data.
1,000,
Yeah.
or 1,500 or 1,400 parents. It was just an odd thing that popped out when we were looking at it.
But that may be language.
It's also trust and transparency, which we've called out before.
Yeah.
So so as we think about what today is, mission, vision, values, maybe there are some additional things for us to talk about. So what the triangle is to engage, I think it's for me, what left out is the disconnect between our teachers and our kids.
Yeah, and we know that, to a few of your points and wonderings, exploring that disconnect at a building level, absolutely worthwhile. Like, where do we see that? And then, somebody else's point too was, well, what is that building doing, right? Where there perhaps is more congruence between the adults and the learners, right? So that certainly can give us a line of inquiry to look at. But nevertheless, right, the trend is there. It's in the data broadly, right? So at an organizational level, we're certainly seeing that. Does that mean it's true at every building? Not necessarily, right? But something that we definitely have to dig into.
So my vision for how we could utilize something like this, and I promise I'll be quiet, you guys have a rule. No, when we met, I was like, really in. An activity like this, generally for our principals to look at the overall data of the district and see that disconnect, then break them into high school, middles, and elementaries, and let them work with their own, in preparation for working with their faculty. That's the way I envision a principal structure for a meeting, so that they can walk away with a real tool, so they can sit down with their own faculty and say, what do you guys notice about the data? Let the faculty come to the same conclusion, and then talk about what are our next steps and how do we go about approaching this, because we all think we're great, our kids, I know this is not what they said, but we all think we're great, and our kids have a different opinion.
And then can we also, I think that we really need to work on this accelerated courses.
Okay.
Because when you look at that, there is definitely comparing our Hispanic and Black African American to our Caucasians, there's a big, huge difference. And how do we help them achieve more?
For us, even in our group, we talked a little bit about with ELLs, just the difference maybe perhaps population-wise, how the achievement is in Collier County versus our county for a similar population.
Who looks at it?
Yeah. And we have some of that data that we'll jump into in the afternoon,
Okay.
when we get into the county data. So like we said, this was definitely getting our toes wet. We could spend hours and hours jumping into this conversation, and Justin is adding all these comments. And this is just a starting point, but we're gonna continue to use this data as the backbone of our conversations throughout the rest of the day. We do wanna give you a new lens, and sticking with that theme of perspective, for round 2. And so just some logistical recommendations. There's the paperclip that was in there. I would potentially paperclip the set of data you have now. I see most folks have done that, just to keep it organized throughout the day. And my apologies if people prefer staples, but we went back and forth. For our next round of data, we are gonna pass out a new packet. And in this packet is the interview and perception data. And so as we mentioned earlier, everything in here is anonymous. You'll see titles, but you won't see names attached. And it's based on the interviews with board members, superintendent, and chiefs. And there's some framing here at the beginning that'll go over what questions were asked, and then some themes that were drawn out. One note about the orientation of this, it is inverted, so you might have to do some flipping, like some of the pages are inverted, so you just might have to move some things around. But we'll pass these out if you want to just send a couple down.
Hey, pass that.
It's not paperclip.
What I would say too is, and this is just a clarification, you're gonna see counts on, it's 23 total interviews, all the board members, Dr. Bernier, right, and really the chief's cabinet, like, essentially those are all Dr. Savage's interviews. I did a number of interviews also, but really just think of this group as one together. We didn't call out any specific roles. we just called out chiefs, board, that's it, okay? So you can think of that group together. Who's, anybody missing? No. Okay.
So we're gonna do the same process, about 10 minutes, and I will bring up the protocol, same protocol, circle, tribe, and square.
I'm starting the number. Justin, your parking
Yes,
lot,
sir.
can you make sure when we format, I think it's because of the way they were formatted, can you make sure they're numbered?
Yes, of course.
This is the combination. Six. Text him, no comment.
Good job.
Justin, can I ask you clarifying questions? So chiefs I get, when I see cabinet, is that chiefs and cabinet, or is that separated? Because there are members of the cabinet that are not.
That are not chiefs.
Okay.
Right, essentially Dr. Savage interviewed all the cabinet, what's cabinet in these slides. I interviewed all that was chiefs, and my colleague just kept them separate because it was two different groups.
Got it, okay.
Apologies, that's.
No, I just wanted to clarify, changes my name.
another about 3 minutes, and then we'll have you reconnect with your partner, and then we'll come back for a discussion.
Put that back later.
I obviously haven't seen my house and how few posts I have. But I'll do my best.
Take another 2 minutes before we meet with your partner. And again, we'll be coming back to this data a couple times throughout the day. All right, so if you're feeling ready and you want to reconnect with your cable partner, please do that. We're just continuing to share what's circling with you, what's something that we want to explore further, and what's square. And then we'll come back together to discuss.
So what I'm thinking, it's obvious
Thank you.
retention is such a priority. But if we cannot recruit teachers, if we cannot retain what we, like why would someone want to come to our district that's a highly qualified employee, if you look at our retention? Why do people drop on flies all the time? So if we can change the culture, which I think we're trying to do, teacher retention is student achievement, student success. So I don't know.
I mean, we all agree that if you don't have the teachers, you'll never get achievement.
It's a chick,
Yeah.
How you keep it.
you know, this board had achievement and then.
I know, I saw
But I think it's a chicken or the egg, like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you know.
I really
Yeah,
see
I noticed
these
culture
two as being
was on the
heavily
board,
related,
Yes.
because without this, we don't have
Unless it's
this.
I know,
Right.
or if it was really small.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed to be a theme
I mean,
throughout.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Three,
I
two,
mean, it's
one,
pretty
and
much.
that's our five.
I think you guys are
Yeah.
achieving this
First,
person.
put that as our
But
five.
obviously, that's where our
But
focus
again, it's
is.
not to
right?
look at it as, like you said, culture, change culture.
But I know why, that squares would,
Well, just from what I know.
So there's no wrong answer.
You have
No,
to-
that's what I meant, it's
You have
like
to
the
think
same
too,
thing, just.
it can't just be like warm bodies and.
So what they're focusing on.
Yeah, it does seem like everything if you go away through is about staffing.
Invested.
Pretty much all of this is about staffing.
It's gotta be the right
Retention,
people that we're hiring.
Got it. What
Better
does that look like?
Versus.
But then
Yeah,
it's,
Hires
kind
can be.
of caught my eye.
Yes.
That's what,
That's bring it from the top,
The one
verbatim,
for
whatever.
student
I mean,
achievement, was saying how
Yeah,
CTE
you
was
don't have
paid for,
people to
then
do-
there was the
I'm
other
chief
I've always said
practical
most
board
important
member.
person.
They're not leaning in, they're doing it.
Yeah.
Well, it depends, or I'm like leaning more
Oh,
towards
yeah.
directors, we're doing that and trying to get more
They
guidance.
would, that's
wanna
what
go
I
work there
was,
for
like,
next
groups.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
same.
you know,
Our first were like, they were
Others
just-
I'd be like, no way.
Correct.
they were not doing
It's
so much.
not
I think
the
they do a
people
good job promoting.
Right.
We don't have.
In culture, a lot of people,
Four
culture is
people.
different.
It's
just
getting that.
Leadership is exactly what it is.
This is
I
not
think
so
it's
well.
our culture.
But
Not
not
to
to
mention,
mention,
I
yeah,
was
looking
finding
at,
out, so, with respect to staff.
when we were looking at like what students' responses were with like things like,
So,
they're,
you and I
and
are
again, going back to
I'm
staff,
effective in
so
legal systems.
As far as.
this is a
general
very,
soft
this is
skills,
a problem
combined
in elementary school.
Yeah, we shouldn't
It's
teach,
middle
yeah,
school.
what I say, we shouldn't teach
So as
middle
far
high
as the
school.
career
Elementary school professionals.
always
but
see,
when it
you know,
comes to
there's like a
For me,
difference.
you know, everything's
Yes.
and it could be.
For
To
me,
me, when I
this is
look
what
at
I've been
different-
talking
there's-
about.
But there's a-
I had told them
Systems,
it's
systems.
Oh, it is.
invested and
Okay.
interested in learning.
And
But learning
But this
is
could
not
be
something
part of
that
the
maybe
issue,
yeah, this is
right?
Suggest, yeah, like the one I went out again,
Some
the same
within
one,
sent out for
wanting to
graduation.
learn more.
That's.
The within
Like
is
certain classes.
Yeah,
like
it's
concern.
high school,
That's a- that's a miss or just a
After
miss.
that
Yeah,
data
It's
point,
a terrible.
points to
Something
that.
like, hey,
We're
this
gonna
is
break
great,
down
you
some
can't
of
gain
those.
this, you want to learn. But
Yeah.
Also, my granddaughter, she did really well in
And
English
I
last year.
do believe that there is a lot of
Yeah.
outside.
This year, she's not doing well in reading.
Square.
Yeah.
But she loves her math teacher. Last year, she didn't do real well, and this year she's doing
We
great.
have too much of that.
So,
Yeah.
teacher has a lot to do.
Yeah,
with
it
it.
It has
that's-
so much to it.
So that is very
And
true.
support it.
Open gate technology.
You know,
That's what somebody
you
brought up.
can't take that for
And by the
granted.
time we were done.
How about you,
But yeah,
Melissa?
age obviously.
But elementary kids.
I mean,
We
I
know.
mean, I have a son.
I was a little surprised by a little bit of it, only because
And one
I think that,
second about school could not be
I don't think we're
Yeah.
diverse enough, maybe, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I was just
It's called.
but not well, I mean, I think some of it we do well,
I don't know.
Research.
some of
What,
it
what page are you on?
the one you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Which one do we do well that you?
I think that,
Within each department.
I thought our internal operations were pretty good. Maybe
So I understand.
our internal operations, I really thought that,
How mine works. And
Oh
then
my
we look
gosh,
for
our
where to do this.
employees,
Right.
so many of our employees
Yes.
know nothing about what
Yes.
we're
What
doing.
I'm
Yeah.
reading
So they
is,
cannot-
We did not
Lessons.
communicate that with
Yeah.
them at all.
And it's harder
So-
as they
so-
get older, because there's some.
Yeah, but
Many of our
still-
employees didn't know about it.
Yeah.
It was really, I mean, it's
The other one I
a
think
difficult
interesting
concept
operations.
to understand, but it was, I mean, we could have wrote about it.
It's a
Some
big-
of
we
the
actually
time,
did.
I know, I saw
that.
that together.
At the capital.
You know,
level,
yeah.
Well, that's the communication piece of it, but-
Yeah.
But I know you used to mentioning more about retention, I think. Your last insurance thing, and that's what
shows we
Okay,
can
we
operate.
could,
Yeah.
11
Out of
grades.
those
And the ones who realize that they have
And
that.
I like that.
And
when they come
I did
together,
increase
got
on
do
the
they do
families.
this?
being
Yeah.
added
Or do they
to
use-
our, it's
family
gonna be
insurance
Yeah.
has-
We'll take 2 more minutes, I'm gonna come back together as a
This
team.
is,
How
this is a little more change in direction. This is,
what they're
it's
saying.
aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And the numbers are showing.
They don't turn on a dime.
Right.
But it's how do you reach every single employee, how do you make sure that they.
but it has to be at the level of the school where they're at, not really at our level, that's the problem, I think,
No,
that.
there's other methods to do
But
it.
it's
And that's
exactly
exactly
what we're
right.
down.
We
Yeah.
have to be focusing on it.
Most people only know what's going on in their school, they have no idea what's going on anywhere else, they just, yeah, they don't really,
But
I would be right down to their classroom, that's why.
so if they're the
But-
leads, leads, they would make sure that that information is written down to us.
But that's
I
where
think
it
on the minutes,
stops.
we're gonna come back together to discuss other
It's all,
groups.
it's all about the management.
And then we'll take a break after that.
Correct,
Actually delaying
But-
the acquisition of the English language.
the information's there, it's not access, that's what I guess,
Yes.
that's what I believe.
All right. Let's come back together. We're gonna do a share out. Again, second, final round for now of what's circling, what do you wanna explore further, what squares? We'll take a break and then we're gonna come back together and do a deeper reflection around this data set and have more time to look at the data if you'd like to. Okay. Let's open it up.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
we're great at teaching elementary kids, maybe we should stop there. I mean, if you look at all the data and everything else there, they're all excited, they're doing really well. We just really need to somehow, like you say, even though they're teenagers and everything else, we have to find a way to keep that going.
To make
Yes.
secondary ed.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And one of the statistics, and it was on the other slide as well, that stood
Yes.
out was again, lessons that made me want to learn new things. And I think
The
4 and
same
5
too.
on elementary was
Same
74%,
percent.
and middle school and high school, 41%. I'm
Right.
guessing,
So you
probably
see that cliff,
Yep.
I'm
Right.
guessing even middle school and high school would be even different if that was broken apart.
which we can do.
Yeah.
I think something if we're circling around, you know, obviously teacher retention is important to, everyone that was interviewed. But you know, is it the chicken before the egg kind of concept? But nonetheless, when the culture of the system that you're in becomes more positive and more engaging and more of a desire for everyone, the teachers or the educators and the staff, all the way from, you know, people that aren't even in the classroom day to day, but they're in that school building, the more positive the culture, the more those people are gonna wanna stay. And it's gonna be very difficult for us to recruit outside if people from other counties and districts and states are wanting to work in Lee County. If they look at our retention rate, that's a red flag. So we've got to make sure, it's gonna be very difficult to recruit if we can't retain. And so if the culture at the top is positive and desirable, the retention's gonna be really high. People are gonna be like, I wanna, you know, what are they doing right? Why is everybody so, you know, happy? And that's gonna lead to student success in the classroom. You know, I've always said a happy teacher is a happy student, happy classroom. And I think you get that a lot in the elementary levels. They're, you know, it's a completely different, it's fun still. And then when you move into secondary, it just takes more time and energy, but I think we'd be remiss by saying if, you know, the amount of discipline that occurs in secondary education takes a lot out of the classroom also. So I think those two things could be really looked at, you know, as the teacher feeling like he or she is dealing with discipline problems all day, not even able to get through a lesson that's frustrating.
So
You know?
if I'm understanding and hearing you correctly, it's when we're looking at recruitment and retention, focusing on retention, of course, recruitment needs to be ongoing work, but the emphasis on retention, and then particularly, you know, building on the idea of between elementary and middle school, what's going on there? How can we better support teachers? You know, how can we better support our leaders, perhaps, right, in addressing culture and improving and building on what's working? Do you want to add something?
Yeah, and then kind of I thought it interesting looking at the pressing issues was the board put culture one and cabinet didn't list culture, I noticed in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously retention goes along with that. I thought that was kind
Me too.
of interesting how things are perspective, so, but.
But I think middle school, we have to remember what's going on when you when a child's going into middle school.
Developmentally.
Yes, exactly. You know, the hormones are like raging. So it makes it, everybody says nobody wants to be a middle school teacher because it's such a hard age, you know. I think once they get into high school, they start becoming who they are, but I think they're trying to figure out who they are in the middle school. So I think a lot more support in the middle school system probably would be better in the long run, if that makes sense. Like what you were saying, I think,
And
you know.
perhaps just like putting my Justin former teacher hat on, you mean more on like classroom culture building, classroom management, right? Like creating those routines and structures that are perhaps better suited for the middle grades.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So, we don't have anything that shows the difference between retention at elementary school, middle school, and high school. And what I'm wondering about is the increased expectations and visible accountability impacting teacher retention.
Yes.
And students leaving elementary school not prepared for middle school, and the impact that has on the culture in the middle school and on teacher confidence and whatever. Also, there's one thing I am concerned about. we talk a lot as a district in terms of climate and culture about the fact that we don't have enough ELL teachers to support the ELL students, and we will never. So focusing on that as the solution is wrong. We need to focus on the problem, which is those kids are not successful. How do we support them, and sticking to a strategy of just trying to find more
Right.
ELL teachers is not gonna get us anywhere, because we will never be able to have enough of a demographic.
I hear you. So accepting that as a design constraint essentially is solves the
Exactly.
problem.
Yeah, it is a problem.
Okay.
Um,
You got that? Yes.
So I think that if we can improve recruitment and retention, our student achievement will automatically improve. So I see the two of them as being inextricably connected to each other. I have a hard time getting out of my own experience and looking at data. I've got 4 children, one just recently left the home in high school. High flyer all the way down to, you know, you're running for life because of your grades. Not a one of them likes going to school. So it you know, kids who are super involved, they have to get up at 5:30 in the morning in order to get to school on time. And they're miserable because they're exhausted all day. So we've talked about perhaps changing start times. We might see a significant improvement in terms of high school and middle school kids, or high school kids' experiences if they're not having to sleep the whole time.
2026.
Yes, no, I know that we're
Sorry, that's
talking
something
about
for
it.
the parking
Is that
lot.
right?
And
For a
then,
long-term discussion.
and then we talked, there was something in here in the pink about internal controls or internal processes or something along those lines. And I know we've talked about retention, but I think that human resources, we shoot ourselves in the foot in terms of what we're doing in terms of recruitment. I think that if we made some changes there, we might see some automatic improvement in terms of recruitment numbers.
Do you mean, if I can push a little bit on that, do you mean in terms of like matching capabilities and competencies to the role and like a candidate profile? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and, actual innovation, instead of calling something that started in 1980, being implemented today as innovative. It's not, like, actual innovation in that space would make a difference, I think.
On the human capital side.
Yeah, and I'm not being sarcastic, I say
Understand.
things in a way that's off-putting, I know, but that's all, the only way I know how to say it, so.
Yes, sir.
This line kind of stood out to me, I know we talked, under operations, chief believes operations have to be more efficient, says that we believe we have systems, but we find evidence every day we do not, so. Kind of what that, where's that coming from?
Where's that coming from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it comes from every day we find out we don't have a system to do that.
Yeah.
And I'll give you something really rudimentary. So like came on board in August, and 3 days before the school year started, those of you who were with me, the panic happened because there was a turf problem on like 7 of our high school football fields. Like I can do a lot of things, but I cannot grow grass in 3 days. So just recently, like David LaRosa and to name, I know we're on live stream, but some members of our team had a meeting with me because they said August is coming. And they kind of looked at me, and I don't think they had a collective memory. So what's the system to ensure that we're prepared for those seasonal changes? Post-hurricane, we knew we still had to continue with football season, so we looked at football lights. We probably should have looked at baseball and softball at the same time. That's just one example of not having systems in play. And I think it comes up in other areas, but I think effective internal systems also provide stability as the district moves through a change. Because there's a leeway of doing things, which connects for me back to conversations we've had about leadership. There's the transactional side of leadership, how to do an evaluation, right? I have to start with a beginning, I have to have a midpoint, and I have to have an end. I have to have people sign off, right? There's the transactional way. There's a whole other way to evaluate people, and that's in a transformational way. And what does our leadership pipeline look like so we can build cultures? Because we teach culture from the time you think you want to be a leader, all the way through when you are, and how do we reinforce it?
A system is basically a cadence.
Yeah, it's transactional at one level, it's like a clock ticking.
Exactly. At each point in time, certain things need to happen, and then you go back and start all over.
All over again.
And, and what I would add is, I appreciate the example, right, in helping us to characterize and understand the different types of leadership, right, and then also how that translates into recognizing the cadences, right, and establishing protocols around them, and the questions that we have to ask and answer, and the time to hold the mirror up, right. There's also been, and Dr. Bernier, you framed when I was at the briefing meeting, shocks and disturbances to the system, right? So, to say the least, not to mention, which we'll get into shortly after our break, very steady population growth, right? And so as the organization grows, so too do those cadences and the systems you need to support them, right, and adapt along the way. And so that's not to say there doesn't need to be improvement, but I just offer that as, right, again, in the spirit of Zoom, right, like adding more data and completing the picture.
So,
Go ahead.
Well, to what extent is the pandemic impacting this data? Themes that I'm seeing developing around my dinner table at night are the freshman class is, I mean, my kids say things, I'm gonna say this out loud in a public meeting, that I know are not true. And I say, have you perceived it with your own senses? If you haven't, you don't know that it's true. But 23 teachers in my school quit because of the freshman class. Well, the freshman class was the most impacted by the pandemic. And is that impacting retention? And is it impacting the culture in the building? If that's their perception, I'm hearing it from 3 kids who are in 2 different schools, and I've heard it from principals. I've heard that the freshmen are exhibiting behaviors that you would typically see in middle school, which is adding an additional layer of difficulty to their jobs every day. So what are we doing to address that systematically? And
the other piece that's also exacerbating some of that could be the COVID pandemic, but to pull back on a couple other things that people said, one of the reasons why kids begin to struggle academically at 6th, 7th, 8th grade and then into high school is because you pull away the fun of reading and other things, because you're now reading for content. And if you don't come out of 3rd grade prepared to read, which our children are not coming out of 3rd grade prepared. So I like the early literacy focus that's come up in a couple of these slides in pre-K. You are gonna struggle, and school's not gonna be fun. And it's not, but maybe there's other engagement. I always talk about working on the work. How do we make lessons easier for teachers but more exciting for kids?
Yeah.
How do we get the planning burden off of our teachers and get the work burden put on our kids in engaging materials? We do spend some time, I think, on the academic side of the house, working on the kid, meaning attendance, discipline, and I think those things are important. But if you work on the work and it's engaging and I want to come to school, I know it's pie in the sky, but some of those issues about attendance and discipline dissipate. It's one of the reasons why athletics is so important, I think, in our school system. I may not listen to my 3rd period algebra teacher, but I'm going to listen to my football coach. They're going to help me grow through a system. So it's that connection too. So.
Well, Dr. Green, right, and bringing back to your original point, we see the drop-off between elementary and middle school, and particularly with the word boring, right? And yes, we want to disaggregate and see, okay, by building, yes, and then also between middle level, right, and high school grades. But what you're bringing up about if I leave 3rd grade and I'm a struggling reader and I get into middle school now, and then now I'm in 9th grade, right? And that entire time, it's getting more and more difficult for me to comprehend, engage, keep up. Think about my confidence, think about my experience.
Yes.
That can go any number of ways. Every child is unique.
And then pin it to the other side of the house, which is the teacher.
Yes.
The teacher who's responsible for content and cannot hand somebody something to read in preparation of them to be ready for the content. So the teacher then has to take on the role and responsibility of physically teaching all of the information versus children being taught how to read something, close read it, and read it for content. Right? Now teachers have that extra burden of not only having to teach and engage kids in lessons, they gotta deliver all of the, they come up with all these systems so they can deliver the content. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So, and that's another reason, that's in my focus group with teachers. When we talk about that, they're like, yes, they point at me, they're like, right.
We had we all know about a bus incident the other day, and I don't wanna get into that, but the students on the bus had to write what they saw. And I couldn't even read it. I mean, the spelling and everything else was atrocious. I'm not even sure the grade level, but I tell you what, in third grade, I wrote better than that. I can tell you right now. So that was a little bit scary, just trying to decipher what they were saying.
But that's the digital aspect, because they're on computers now, they're not writing as much, like you think, so.
I'm not saying why, I'm just saying that's,
Yeah, but we have
that's
to-
where it is
but
when
you
they
have
gotta
to
read out
identify
the book.
You have to identify that, though,
Yeah.
to be able to,
Right.
if you don't identify it, then you've got a problem. You can't move forward without identifying.
Can we get some data for later, next time, on retention versus new hires? I mean, how many are leaving versus new
Yes,
hires for several years back?
Trailer, yes.
Yeah.
Because I know when I was in school, my sister got out of school and was becoming a teacher, and there were very few openings, if any. And they were worried about getting into the school. Now it's totally flipped. I know, we have more leaving every year than we hire.
Because it was really considered a profession at that
Well,
time.
for whatever,
Yes.
there's gotta be,
Yes.
somewhere along the line there should be a graph, and we
Yeah.
can
Okay.
maybe start to see a trend.
Actually, we do have access to that, so why don't we take a 10-minute break? Let me see if I can pull that up while we take a break and reset. It is 10:37, so let's say 10:45. We'll restart, okay? Do we want to talk through this more, or are we good to move on?
That's pretty good. Does anyone know the average tenure for a new teacher?
Okay, we can pull that, sure.
How many years they,
Don't they say if they
I don't
stay
need it right
for
now. I can
three,
get
that
that.
they
Oh,
stay-
Oh, okay, good, good, okay.
Yeah, one of the other things that we want to look at, and I was talking to professional development last night, that's why I was there late. You've all seen, I think we could pull it for the board, you've all seen the implementation tip. When you build in a new system, you build a brand new veterinary clinic. Right, there's an implementation tip, because you gotta get used to your new space and other things, because you built something new and better, eventually you'll rise out of it. There's something called the beginning teacher graph. And it starts in August where they're sky high and they're gonna save the world, and then they fall into the doldrums by October. Then they rise out because they can see Thanksgiving and Christmas, but then they fall back in February. When I started talking to our principals about that, at least the ones I was speaking to, they had no sense of that. So we are going to be utilizing this that summer so they can pick those target points, because we're really good about welcoming everybody at the time they're all sky high, feeling they're gonna make a difference. It's what you do in September and October to get them to Thanksgiving and how you react after Christmas that is potentially key. And not everybody follows the perfect curve, but generally teachers go into some doldrums very particular times of the year. And we need to be prepared for that. And how, as a leader, do we adjust our supports for them during that period of time? They're all clean.
It needs to be prefaced, yes.
That's you.
No, that's a Riverdale.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
Go Ravens.
Windbreaker.
At least,
Do you have a park-
maybe pull over your legs and keep them warm.
I'll take the towel.
And this is mine, it's clean.
The towel,
Oh, towel, yes, this is clean as well, it's very fluffy.
it's often
Ah,
really good.
yes, that's
It's
good.
fluffy, would you like some?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
No, just my,
So I'm gonna move us along here.
Part of that is
Called by
COVID
walrus
as
soup,
well.
I still have walrus soup, so.
Okay. So we're gonna switch gears. We were just talking about the retention data and the teacher experience, and before that, we dove into organizational level data, right? We didn't get into school level yet, but we certainly can and will moving forward. What we're gonna do is step out of the district for a few minutes and think about the county more broadly, and think about the workplace and the future of work. Very, very broadly, share a couple of ideas and considerations on that front, and then we're gonna get into envisioning, and that's gonna bring us into lunch, okay? So, we know, and you're all very familiar with the rapid growth of the county. Population-wise, and of course, jobs that follow, right, with the population growth. Very much so outpacing the national average, both in terms of jobs and also just population, people moving into the county. And that's projected to continue. I'm certainly not a demographer. I mean, we referenced different workforce reports. We referenced demographic data from the county. So that's all the data sets that you're looking at are from the local government. And we know that this trend will continue, right? It's held pretty strong for the better part of a decade and is expected to continue at least through 2029, right? That's what all the projections are saying, and again, the local data that I was able to access. And so certainly there's implications for that for schools, right? We talked about systems and adapting systems. How are we thinking about, if we know more people are coming, and I know that's something that the board and the district are thinking about, where do we need to add schools or expand, right? And what might that look like, and do we, right? So another way to think about the population also is from a generational lens, okay? So what's interesting and unique about the county is distribution of generations, yes, but also who is the predominant generation and who are the predominant generations? Because there needs to be a balance between, yes, like the baby boomer generation, right, and people who move here, who might move here to retire or to be closer to their kids or their grandkids, right? And how are we balancing what they value and what they want out of the school system, right? Because they're voters, with the families who are sending their children to school as well, right? And when you think about another consideration here, and so what this visualization is getting at is distribution of races and ethnicities across the county. Now, this is not to say that there aren't Black or African American families in parts that are gray, right? It's just generally there tend to be concentrations. That's all that we're looking at here. And interesting, when you look at the two graphs, if we're to overlay them, which I'm not that sophisticated with data visualization, but if you look at where all the green is, those are Generation Z, right? So 1999 and 2016, and then you look at, right, your Hispanic and Latino population, there's certainly overlap there, right? So something just to be aware of, right, is when we're thinking about refreshing our plan, right, and making sure we're listening and hearing from our constituents.
Can you go back one slide again?
This one? Yeah.
Just seeing where our newest families are starting to settle.
Yeah, and I feel like the graph overlay would be really important because the older we get, the less diverse we are. So the age doesn't really help me as much as.
Well, I think if you look, I mean, you're right, it doesn't.
And
So-
the next slide doesn't really help me either because that's the population of the county. We're not dealing with the population of the county, we're dealing with population of families and students who go to our schools. And if you compare the population of the county to the population of our students, there is no comparison. They're just not the same.
Say more about that.
The younger we get, the more diverse we get.
Right.
So,
Well, I would ask you, like, where are schools, like, where are you seeing population growth in schools, right? That's what we can look into, right? And so where are you seeing enrollment increasing, right? Which is data that we can look back.
Central Cape and East.
Central Cape.
Right.
Central North and Cape, sorry if I'm getting.
No.
Central Cape.
Some demographics have a tendency to have more kids than other demographics. So that sort of varies too, though. You have to.
Well, I mean, look at that though, it's the Generation Z, it's those are the people that are having babies. You're not, the baby boomers aren't having babies anymore. So, I mean, that's where your children and families are gonna be. And then those are the affordable places to live. And those are also the most opportunity places to live in Lee County anymore.
Yes, and that's why we brought this in, right, is to say, like, well, baby boomers not having children, that doesn't mean that they aren't supporting their grandkids or families, but it's the Generation Z, right, and millennial population that are gonna be having and raising their families. However, I get the point, right, like looking at the distribution of data for the school population specifically would help us, would just put a finer point on this, right?
Yeah, but you made a good point. The purple still votes and they
Yes.
talk to us and they show up at board meetings and so it doesn't necessarily matter. Because we do serve them all.
Right, it depends on what the question is too,
Right.
right, and so.
Okay, what?
Baby boomers, yeah.
Numbers of the 1964.
This is from the county, I can't, right, okay. So now, the other thing I wanna point out though too is to the point about younger ages, growing diversity, and also where do we see, when we say diverse, what do you mean? I mean, you see a lot of growth, especially among the working age population of Hispanic and Latino population in the county, right? There's been a steady trend, if you look at this line here on the count, right, in percent of workforce age, working age, from 2013 right through 2020, growing up from about 117, just under 118,000 to just under 164,000, right? And so you see this trend and that demographic continuing to grow in the county as well, which you know that, right? You know that based on the number of English language learners that you're getting in the schools as well, okay? Okay, so now just switching gears a little bit and thinking about top industries by job. So this is current state, okay? And some of you might be like very, very familiar with this, like given some of the work that you do, but it's retail, healthcare, right? Accommodation, hospitality essentially, and construction, okay? And most of these are projected to grow in the years to come, for sure, right? This is not to say there aren't other top jobs, and then there's a workforce report that actually is linked to the slides, and I can certainly share that with everybody. It's organized by Florida Gulf Coast and in collaboration with other universities and colleges in the area. They have much deeper data on specific jobs and specific roles within these categories, if that's of interest. But I do think that that's something that when a chief or directors who are thinking about pathways in CTE, my guess is they're already thinking about that and considering it, right? But bringing that data in, right, and understanding, okay, where are the jobs, how are we making sure that we're reconciling here is certainly a consideration. Okay, I'm gonna ask you to take a minute and just read the slide. So again, this is just very, very broad data, but to give us some kind of guideposts when we're thinking about, because we're about to get into an activity about envisioning the future and what we want to be true. Right? I heard from board members and chiefs when we're interviewing, we want, not all, but we want as many students and families to stay here and work and support the economy and support their community, right? And this is where we see the jobs. This is not exhaustive, but it does give us some trends, right, and some categories to think about in terms of where employment is going to be. Right? Is this raising anything for you? This is just meant to, again, give us some different ideas to consider, right, and data points.
I feel like this is an area where we do a good job.
Yeah.
I feel like our career and tech colleges are doing a good job of getting the community in and telling us what they need, and that's starting to happen more and more at the high schools as well. So I feel like this is where we do
It's
well.
validating. Yeah.
One of the things I didn't notice, which is actually a bit of an unusual trend, is we have, obviously these jobs, what ends up happening is a lot of our kids are leaving, going other places, but the people that are coming here are bringing remote work for themselves. So it's kind of a weird phenomenon that the people that are going off where to do careers, but then the ones coming in already have an established career and a job somewhere else. So it's kind of a weird
Like they're using services and buying products, but they're not
directly
employed here.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, it's a new phenomenon in the past 5 to 10 years, right?
But it's also a very depressing outlook for our student population, that they're going into low wage jobs.
Right.
I mean, we're basically training people to go into low wage jobs or leave the county.
And that's why they leave.
Right. So, that's really discouraging.
But that's we don't have the opportunities here like
That's
other
right.
larger places, and we're not bringing in enough corporate, there's Gardner, we have limited,
But that's because the county doesn't have a
Gardner
strategic
brings in
plan or
people from
sustainability plan. We're not working with the county to say, you've got this pipe dream, and we're trying to accommodate this pipe dream. But it is a pipe dream for now, because you've got nothing fundamental invested in the long-term economic development of a more robust economy, other than.
service industry, that's what we primarily are.
Well,
Tourists and serving.
and the other consideration is, I'm gonna skip ahead a bit, right? If you think about globally, so bear with me for a second. If you think about globally, so what you're looking at is a McKinsey job prospects report, again, globally, and this is based off of McKinsey analyzing data from companies across the globe, across all the sectors you see on the y-axis, right? So from healthcare to office support, administrative work. The black and gray represent where there's projected decreases. Why is that? Because of a number of things, not the least of which is automation, artificial intelligence, climate change, right? Which both can add and take away jobs. Where you see, the reason I brought this slide in, and we decided to bring it in, where you see alignment is around healthcare, right, and STEM and health professionals, where there's congruence with the county, right? Now, your point about lower wage jobs or like entry-level jobs, that is very much a reality. Like you started talking about technology earlier and like what is the role and how do we respond to that in a classroom setting, and it's also on the pathway side, right? Like we know that that's coming, and we don't, with the proliferation of artificial intelligence too, what we know now and what this outlook looks like today, it could look very different in 2 years, right?
Yes.
1 year. And so it goes back to your, I think, your point about cadences and like how are we checking in on this and being aware and then continuing to talk about it, right? Okay. But also, I'll go back, to here. Well, you notice also, and this is from that same workforce outcomes report, essentially there's a bar that is set with this group that 55% is the desirable percentage of the working age population that you need to sustain the economy, right, and as the economy grows. This is for the southwest region of the state, right, and what you see is like across the board, because of the population growth and a number of factors, you're not seeing enough skilled workers, essentially, right, and so, which just gets back to the point that we've been kind of talking about, which is that that's where a significant role the district plays, which it sounds like that's something that was brought up in a lot of interviews too, like where with CTE we see that as a strength. Like yes, we could get better at helping students to reflect on their pathways and what they want to be achieving long term, but our kind of constituent parts of our CTE programs that came out as a strength across the people that we're interviewing, and so it's encouraging, right, and hopefully validating when we're looking at some of these like jobs data. But the fact remains too, right, based on this data set, that in the region there needs to be more skilled workers and in the county as well. Okay. Let me stop there. Any other? We stopped a couple of times to ask questions and share some insights, but before we get into the future workforce considerations, any other questions or ideas that are coming up? And then more so, like, are there implications for learners that you can think about, or educators or staff? Just a quick open conversation about the data, if anything comes to mind.
Can I have a question? Can you
Sure.
go back, please?
Which one?
One more.
This one?
No, one more. The one with the blue and the black.
Oh, that was forward.
Oh, the McKinsey one. Yes.
So does that, the blue, black, and, I'm sorry, the gray and black, does that mean there's a decreased demand for that?
Exactly. And that those jobs, over time, will decrease
How,
in terms of the number of jobs available.
how about, how is educator and workforce training decreasing in the United States? That's crazy to me. When we're starting in a hole.
Virtual learning is how it's happening.
But we still need teachers.
Right, but the emphasis is starting to change.
You
and
see a disruption of the models.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that it's what is better, or that data is not there yet. We're not there with that data.
Yes.
And that's also not the county.
Correct.
Possibly
This is
more
global.
homeschooling.
This is global. These are very broad trends.
Non-teachers,
Yeah.
teaching.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
Sarah.
of course.
There's some lingering questions. There's one of the things that when I came back, I was gonna look at that strand. Because that strand going across the whole area, short of 2 countries, or 3 countries.
Mhm.
But China and India are
Right,
increasing
China and India are
educators.
on a decrease.
Right.
And you can, 'cause
You see, like,
Germany's on its way
Well,
back.
Where the trends are strongest too is where you have
As-
the
as-
consistent colors, right? But again, this is who knows what this will look like 2 years from now,
No, I understand.
right? Because of the changes, again, mostly in technology, right? Okay, all right, so.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so this is the slide. So some other consideration. Actually, I want to have Chris jump in here too. So this is more, so we're going to look at a couple slides, just 3, about workforce considerations in a different sense.
I already see some less. Yeah, this is, as Justin was mentioning, a lot of, on the parking lot, there's a lot of talk about retention and recruitment. And it's a common theme that we see coming up across the district with interviews, with conversations we're having with folks. And so these next couple slides are just some data to sort of stem the conversation even further and thinking about what does retention and recruitment look like within Lee County. And so, interesting graphic here. This is from a consulting company called McCrindle. They do a lot of demographic work and a lot of consulting work. And what you can see is they're breaking down different categories based on different generations. And you can see it's breaking down through builders, baby boomers, all the way over to our generation alpha, which you were just born about 6 years ago. So you're barely in kindergarten. But up here is just some interesting data that you can chuckle about and some interesting things. And I think of my brother who, he probably doesn't even know what an iPad is. He's 20 years old. So, but down here is where we want to frame it. And it's really thinking about the needs of these workers as they enter the workforce and things that they may expect to see coming into the workforce, because it does vary. And so as an example, if you go over to generations who will be entering the workforce either now or in the next couple of years, what are they looking for in a job? Is that the same as someone who entered the workforce, let's say, 20 years ago? I see a lot of heads shaking no. It's obviously not. And so using this to think about, for example, as we go further to the right, how can a principal or how can a district leader adapt their leadership style to meet the needs of an incoming workforce? If we look back years, decades ago, there was a lot of controlling and a lot of directing leaders, and that was the leadership style that was customary. And we still see some of that today, especially in education. But as we move forward, 5, 10 years down the road, how are we training our leaders to be adaptive to the needs of their future employees coming into the district? And so we can share this with you so you can dive into it further, but this can, if you want to jot any notes down to add into our conversation that we're going to have here in a moment.
Yeah, and part of it, right, that has implications for, as we're running professional development sessions, right, or meetings. I mean, Dr. Bernier, even before when you were talking about how we could repurpose that data protocol and sitting down together at a table and giving each other feedback, right, and data, as opposed to, well, I'm this role, therefore I give all the feedback, right? So like that example, right, is a perfect one, right, as it maps this.
And thinking about retention and recruitment, if you have an empowering leader, will that adjust that metric versus if you have a controlling leader? So that's something to think about as we move forward as well.
And then similarly, so what you're looking at here, so this is again, global. So this, Deloitte does an annual survey. They've been doing it for, I think, the better part of 11 years. And they survey Gen Zers and millennials, and they're basically trying to understand what are the issues that you care about. So this is across like many countries, right? So in total, I believe it's over 20,000 respondents. And again, we're sharing this more for you as the district as an employer, right, and thinking about the workforce, right? So what they notice, and what Deloitte has been noticing over the past couple of years, is that more and more employees are choosing employers who align with the thing that they care about or who help address the thing that they care about, right? And so we know that cost of living is very much an issue. That's a known fact, right? We also know that based on this survey, more and more people who are entering the workforce are concerned about climate, right? And they want an employer who's taking strides or at least aware, right, and thinking about that. Obviously, unemployment would be a good reason for them to come to the district, and also the region, right, and the county, okay? And thinking about, you see down the list is like my personal safety, am I being cared for? Which when you look at the data from educators, safety was pretty high. Right, and understandably so. I mean, that's been a priority of the district. That's something that came out from many of the interviews. And so, again, we're sharing this because those could be things in interviews that we're speaking to, right? Those could be things to help communicate a value proposition to employees, not just when they're first coming to the district, but also when they're here, right? When you're having check-ins. Okay.
And then we have 2 more visuals to just ground our conversation, which we'll jump into in a moment. But this is an article that we pulled from Education Week, and they spoke to industry leaders in all different industries, business, engineering, all across different fields, all across the country, and they asked those hiring managers, what are you looking for? What's most important when you're hiring new employees? And here's just a list you see on the right of things that they mentioned. And so just taking stock of what employers outside of Lee County are looking for to make sure that that is a part of how we are preparing our students as they enter the workforce. And there's some really strong things there that are already probably embedded in the district, but just to ground the conversation.
And we were talking earlier about, I think you were pushing us on candidate profile, and are we hiring, right, checking for certain capabilities. Like, yes, we need leaders to be able to do the transactional pieces, but also, do we have and are we assessing leaders who can demonstrate resilience or an openness to like adapting the systems in the way that they work? At the same time, we want to value the expertise that people are bringing in, right? So these again might be considerations more on the HR side for hiring, but then certainly with students as well, right? And preparing students for the workforce.
So with that, we want to do another pause point, and we want to give you all the space to sort of unpack anything you jotted down, anything that is standing out to you from some of the data and visuals that we showed. So we'll do a couple minutes just turning and sharing with your table partners. Focus on the question, given the global workforce trends, plus future-ready skills and shifts in society, what are the implications for Lee's learners and Lee's community? So just thinking with your partner, anything that's standing out to you. And we'll come back in about 2 to 3 minutes to share out.
Can you go back to that, can you go?
Go ahead.
Can you go to the education week?
Yeah, that's the one I want.
Okay.
Proactive, whereas.
I'm gonna leave it up there.
Yeah.
So as I look at these, I
I know out
see
where I live,
there's some that we can do, but there's an awful
It's
lot
like-
that can be
Yeah.
But the yes.
Yeah.
Now you look at it.
It's like that was like the nucleus, yeah.
Oh, like the research statement, because,
Yeah.
you know how
Yeah,
there's
there's so many
the,
more development.
boomers, Gen X.
And some that were stalled in recession, I noticed that are back in business, like overall. I mean,
Like
it
that.
was stalled in recession, now it's back.
There was a whole,
Yeah.
session on that,
Yeah.
the communication, and so I love that, because it was like, it was a door to my head.
Right, I was thinking that same thing, I'm like, what did I, yeah.
So, when they were talking about how much.
Right on time.
But they are the silence, the power ones, how do they relate to the Gen Zs?
That's another.
How do you lead Gen Zs, how do you lead baby boomers?
You have to go to them,
Yeah.
to how they're, how they think and their process.
Which is different.
It is totally different.
Yeah.
But I think that's where it's true. You don't even have to.
Yeah.
And that's
Sorry.
kind of scary what you
No,
said.
I know too.
The first thing I thought about is how we are racist to education. That's maybe it's coming our way. And there's no ability to inform it. So I think we have a harder, there's much more that just systems that we have to, I don't even know how to say like, we can't.
Even
There's really the offerings.
I I think you all.
Why does a third grader have to be in third grade? Why can't a third grader be in third grade? A third grader learns everything they need to learn to be a proficient third grader, and so is fourth grade.
Because they have a parent that's out of third grade into fourth grade. That's a lot of times what happens.
Yeah, but what about a kid who's done with third grade by December?
Right.
Can't they move on to,
Right.
like, why does it have grades? Why don't we have grades with opportunities for socialization at an appropriate age and opportunities for education that's appropriate for each kid?
The Montessori.
No, not really Montessori. Montessori is like mixed schools. This is really, you master something
Oh,
and move on.
mastery and then move
You don't
on.
have to wait. You don't have to wait for your peers to catch up. You don't have to wait until you age up. You literally learn as you're ready, as your brain is ready.
And you know, been few students that have achieved that are in college at, 15 and stuff like that are extraordinary, but, so how did they navigate that? How did they? Yeah.
We have a statute in SNEEM that doesn't permit that on a large.
Okay.
Because like, they're prom, not just third grade. But Ron can read like Ron. Way beyond. And even though they try to give him a little extra stuff to do, but still, that's where that boring part comes in. So how do you keep that going?
Right.
But you're right.
Because like I said, you're.
I don't know if they do now, but when I was in school, we had reading levels and we would go in our reading separate groups. But, so we were all different, and we would be, they would put us together.
Or you're reading, but the rest of your, all of your.
Would be together, yes, right.
So if you're already reading it,
But they did that with math too, like you had, you know, and they did that with my daughter's math.
We just focused based on I would have been in high school in ELA while in elementary school. Like I would, what I.
Advanced sections, certain things, right, that's what I was just gonna say, not, yeah,
But we don't do.
no, but,
well, she's doing that in virtual now. She's already just like learning.
see, some kids learn, I personally don't learn well virtually, like, it wouldn't do me, I need to be able to write stuff down, they don't do that anymore. Like, for me, my learning is, if I write it down, I remember it. If I don't write it down, then I don't really remember it as much. But that, kids learn different.
I've heard, well, I've heard that, I get kind of that all of us, like, we just kind of like, we're teaching children how to be empathetic, how to be self-aware, self-regulated.
How is that?
We can reinforce so that it should be our responsibility to make them agile.
And I think that a good teacher examples that, and that's the education.
Putting that responsibility solely in the realm of the educator and the education system. We're gonna fail or setting ourselves up for failure, but everything needs to be taught in performance from birth. Self-awareness and self-regulation needs to be taught in performance from birth.
Yeah, but that's not happening, so now,
And that's the problem is we're setting ourselves up for failure if we don't have,
All right, everyone, we'll come back in about 1
families who
minute.
are partners and their children.
I mean, we lost teamwork and collaboration during the pandemic, they were all separated out, you know what I mean? Which they know they learn better.
Yeah, but there was a lot of, virtual.
Yeah, there was, but, yeah, there was, but it's still kind of different, it's not,
For them, it's not.
well, that's true, that's true.
I mean, my daughter's still, tutoring kids in the county in Shirley's and Hammond.
Yeah.
And they're getting just as much out of tutoring as they do when she sat next to them.
His new schools. I know, I wish I would have.
So would love to just hear from anyone who wants to share anything that potentially your partners mentioned or anything that's resonating with you based on the question.
Well, we're talking about growth, but one of the problems is the elephant in the room. We don't know what HB1, which is the voucher, is going to affect. We may have growth in all these areas and have less kids in our schools, or it may have a minimal effect. So, and that's just going to almost be a wait and see. We can try to plan for it. I don't know if the superintendent has any ideas on that, but.
He goes when it finishes his Jesus.
But the bottom line is, I mean, this is great, but we just really don't know. The other thing I would like to see, we saw where the growth is and where everybody is. Do you have a demographic where it's projected to be
In
more
terms of,
future growth, or did y'all bring it?
for
up?
Lee County,
Lee County?
we could,
I'd like to see a little more of that. I mean, like, I know in my area.
projected growth is.
Yeah, like my area, they have a big development, Babcock, and everything's, just like they did Bonita Bay, started in Bonita, and everything just blossomed out from there. In my area, I know everything's gonna blossom out from Babcock, because there's already a lot of development plans, you know, in the north, because that's just a lot of open land
Yes.
type thing. So I don't know what the professionals say, that's just what I'm seeing personally, I'm not a professional.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't reach out to the county.
We have some internal demographic data from Delta Data Demographics as well.
Excellent, perfect.
So can you go back to that slide that showed that's it. So I look at that list and I wonder how we can be responsible for everything on that list. Because we can't teach a child to be empathetic if they're not taught that from birth in their home. Self-awareness, self-regulation, those are things that need to be taught and reinforced from birth. And there are others on that list. And so I look at that list and I see the expectation is that they will learn that in school. And we are setting ourselves up for failure because you can't teach a kid to be empathetic 5 days a week, 180 days out of the year. You need that support at home. And increasingly in my time on the board, I have learned that the lack of support in the home for education is a big part of our problem, and I don't know how to fix that.
It's a great point.
I would push back on that, because I agree that a lot of our kids come without that foundation. But we were having the conversation, that you can't teach these things, but you can model them and live them.
Right, I agree.
And so my question is, we know that we need to model this for kids, but how do we get this? How do we get teachers to be doing this without it a curricular or, well, you said it, so I'm gonna let you talk, even though you've got your mouth full of
Overt. I don't know the answer to HB1. I do know HB1 is going to have some form of impact. We are going to have to wait and see what HB1 does with the finances in our district and whether the state legislature and everybody has calculated correctly what the impact can be. And they all have varying different opinions. I do believe, I always use the Home Depot, Lowe's. You have a better product, people will come to your world.
Yes.
Right. And if we have a better product, people will continue to choose us. So strategic planning is really valuable in that. The word I used with board member Morgan was overt. I don't know that these can be overtly taught. Duckworth's growth, mindset, and resilience, grit. She's pretty clear in her research that it can be taught, but not necessarily directly. I can't sit down with Justin and say, I'm gonna teach you about grit today. Kids learn grit. They learn grit from home projects, they learn grit from assignments and stuff they have to push through. We learn grit as adults every day, because, and that's one of the reasons why I always joke with all of you, when you see us laughing, it's not because we have any disrespect for the situation, it's either laugh or cry.
Right.
So our grit response is to find some humor in it and figure out, forget the term you used earlier today, but when we have difficult situations, how we push through them.
Yeah, and it's not just academic, that's why we have music, because kids will push through music, that's why we have sports, because they don't learn, it's the whole.
Right, so agility and flexibility, right? I think some of the data showed us that agility and flexibility, the kids are looking for it, because they want some alternatives when they look at their assignment, right? How can I apply this to what I want to learn? So I think there's an opportunity here, and I think the real opportunity is what do we do strategically to engage parents? Could we engage parents in a section of a strategic plan about these issues and go out and overtly teach it to parents? Of course, we'll be teaching it to potentially teaching it to all the parents we don't need to teach it to. But how do we then reach deeper and find a way to find those parents that we do need to draw in? And then teach it to our teachers too, not from you have to sit down and write a lesson plan on empathy.
Yeah.
But are there certain moments in a story that you're reading or a novel you're reading where empathy is present and to address it?
Yeah.
And to ask a student, what if you were facing the same situation? How could you approach it in a method that would not be empathetic, and how can you approach it in a manner that is empathetic?
And defining the differences.
Correct.
For them to, that's just understanding the definition.
I agree. The last thing I want to do is take these, bring them into a curriculum meeting with the teachers and say, hey, new set of standards. Right? We don't want to see that.
I get concerned about modeling and teaching agility and flexibility, and then the kid goes home and they ask for something and they get it, and if they don't get it, they cry and they throw a fit, and then their parent gives it to them. You know what I mean? Like the ways of,
Yeah, that's out of our hands.
that's my point. My point is we have them 6-7 hours a day.
Growth
We
setting.
can do
Growth mindset and resiliency.
we can do only so much.
And you don't always get your way.
Right.
I would say, we gonna add something too? No. Your original point though about, and Dr. Green, you just spoke to this. My former middle school teacher self, if I saw my principal say, Justin, you have to teach all these skills, I would be like, it's nice knowing you, right? Because that would be, I'm trying to help
Yeah.
students learn how to read, so I certainly understand that. I do think that, and I'm gonna come back to cadence, very huge proponent of cadences, and specifically reflection during those cadences. And starting with very small, right, as this group, what are we doing right now? Part of it is reflecting, right? We could have brought a lens and said like, okay, when has the district been shown growth and been resilient? When has the district leaned in and the board worked together to adjust strategy or to be creative in the way that we're approaching a solution? So absolutely with modeling, right? But also it's like, we could be, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It could be a frame to think about what did we learn, right? So it's more of a kind of constructivist way of thinking about it, but there's a lot of knowledge to be gained and learning to happen from, let's say that I'm in a CTE program and I was out in the field, right, and I had some sort of exchange or run-in that was like very positive or was, kind of uncomfortable for me. I should get help reflecting on that. And if I do that even like once a quarter, and I have an awareness and more so a language to talk about it with, like that's all it could be. So, and I'm getting into solutions mode, and I know that's not why we're here, but we certainly want to be mindful, and in no way do we want to overwhelm teachers. I know nobody's saying that.
In a conversation, unrelated educators, classroom teachers, in a conversation about 360s the other day in evaluations, there was some discussion when we were talking about what are best practices when conducting an evaluation. One of the things missing in our bullets that we put out to our principals is that evaluation should always include a face-to-face conversation. Another aspect was, how do we model what our attorney, Kathy Bruno, and I have done in terms of the 360? How do we model that at other levels? So that students and principals get a feeling for what their culture's like because they overtly ask for it. It's very valuable feedback to what I've been referred to me before as blind spots. The person just doesn't see it in themselves, and it provides really great.
I mean, like self-awareness.
Right. And then self-regulation.
Yeah.
What's your process to get better at that?
But some of these can't they be projects that they take home and have parents help with it, with their project or homework? Something that would help, if it's not happening at home, that kind of helps gear it back towards home? I'm asking the teachers in the room, the educators.
Yes. I mean, I think also there's just a curtail off of what Dr. Bernier was saying. No, we may not be able to like teach a lesson on empathy, but
Right.
calling it out, doing activities and
Yeah.
honestly, those secondary ages that we've had, we've talked about our concerns in the room. These are the types of activities that they would think are fun if we would gear our learning throughout the day
Yes.
around that. This is team building, and those
Right.
age groups, that population looks forward to being able to express their opinions about what they're thinking. So these are all things, while we aren't doing a lesson on them, we can pull them into the teaching.
Exactly.
I know there are programs like Kagan that are well-rounded programs that we can implement in classrooms, and not just elementary, but in secondary. I know I don't know if you've been around long enough, anybody here, to do Love and Logic, but Love and Logic curriculum was something that was brought in so that families can come in and discuss with, it was a curriculum for parents. And it was a nighttime event every quarter and every month. And those teach lessons, or especially with our ESOL learners or ELL families, those were the people that showed up because they wanted to be able to help. I just think that
Yes.
we need to start making these opportunities. We're post-pandemic. So start bringing some of these opportunities back into the classroom.
So
Yes.
connecting I really appreciate what you said about bringing families in, especially families of English language learners, and getting back to the point that you made about, look, we're not gonna find, we can try, but we're probably not gonna find all the teachers that we need to support those students. But what's an asset that you do have? Their families, right? And whether or not those families speak English, right, or like, you could find people to support an evening like that,
Yes,
right? And so, to build that community, and, you know, and perhaps, and this is a conversation for, second time and beyond that, right? Like, those could be conversations that are, like, worked into the, not necessarily that specific action, but like, the shape of that is part of the plan, right? And prioritizing middle and high school, for example, right? Just connecting some dots from our conversation. So again, I appreciate the share, and I'm just hearing, you know, some emerging alignment here around these ideas.
And it makes me also think of, to the point that's up here, trying to triangulate where family engagement is really strong in the district and turnkeying some of those actions to middle school, to high schools, but really trying to identify what are the actions that leaders, teachers, whoever is doing on a daily basis to keep families engaged, especially to start off. Before we move into our next activity, any other thoughts, questions, or things we want to bring up about the data we've shared for the past 20 or 30 minutes?
I would say that, and I was speaking with Melissa, and I know Arbor was there too, so we had that session where it showed us how the silence, the baby boomers, how each generation spoke with, how do you communicate with the difference? Because everyone has a different way of communication, of hearing, and so if you have the silence, well, they're probably what, 80, 90, how old are they now? If they're the ones who are teaching the Gen Zs, they're gonna have a difficult time. So it's like, you really have to learn who they are and kind of meet them where they're at when you're going to teach them.
Yeah, and I have one thought. So in terms of the future, we've talked a lot about CTE and how we've been working with the business community to develop programs that are needed by the business community. But there's a third leg on that stool, and that is the county commission and the work that their Office of Economic Development does, and all of those people who are doing the long-term plan. They are not part of our conversation.
silos,
Yeah,
In their
I
own
mean,
silo.
we have built, and we are in the process of building that relationship with the business community, the people who are concerned about economic development, but the people who support a lot of the foundational stuff that go with it, that's the county commission, and we do not talk with them at all. As in a three-way, there's no point in us talking with them one-on-one, because we would need the engagement of the business community to help to facilitate that conversation. But I really feel like their absence makes it difficult to do the kind of long-term planning and investment that the county needs. Putting it out there.
Well, it's just telling our story and bringing them along with us at the table, that we're not together, we're not collaborating together for the best of our students, the best results of our students.
So we talk about families, social services, all of those things that go with helping families,
Yes,
transportation, things like that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that would, with their engagement, might make progress a little easier. Anyway,
We'll certainly have that.
have fun.
Sam, just say that.
Oh, I interrupt. So one of the things I keep thinking about and trying to wrap my head around, and we're talking about skills and future, I talked about before about, people with, virtual work, work at home and stuff like that coming in here is, and you talked about this, Member Guganelli, about in regards to having, corporations and stuff come here, but that model is changing. I even see that in the business community. We might be preparing not kids for the Lee County itself area, but they may be going doing work from home or virtual. And how do we wrap that in there? Because that's a changing industry. It's not just based on, said what we do locally per se. So we're preparing some of our children here for that kind of environment. And what does that look like? I don't know what that is yet, because corporations are saying, hey, it's cheaper and more efficient to do it, at a base somewhere and then have, yeah, exactly. So, how does that play into all this?
And I like to add to that, because I have a daughter that used to work for Chico's, and now she works from home for another company that supports Chico's and some other TJ Maxx and stuff like that, and it's all internet-based and everything. But her office is actually in New York City. And she doesn't go to New York City, and they all work together, collaborate via computer, and she's like, does it from home all day long, and that all happened just prior to really COVID, the pandemic. But when she was going to go to college, I said, Raquel, you have to, don't do a generic, English major or communications major, or, do a strict job, be an attorney or, a veterinarian, but that reality now is not the focus on what kids are going, they're going back to the communications degree, and, because that's, people just want to see that they went to school and but not a specific, job anymore, because those people are not doing the job they went to school for. And so my daughter got a communications degree, whatever. So, but my point is, you focus now on being an attorney, but at the end result, are you an attorney now? You know what I mean? It doesn't always work that way, but what you learned to get there, the skill set will, help you in something else that you do. But how do you educate a child from gearing them towards college, or that starts at elementary school, but it could change by the time they graduate. So how do you focus on that? It's moving so fast. Just on, because I just think I had one go to school at a different time and then another, and they both now have generic degrees instead of a focused degree, which I had told them, be a dentist, be some, but that's not how. Do you understand what I'm saying though? How do you give that guidance?
Some of it comes through experience, which you have to have the experience in order to learn some of these skills. But I agree, and I think just some the foundational skills, setting your children up for that, which are here. But like to your point, you have to have that experience to fully be the person you want to be eventually. You're not going to get that in kindergarten or fifth grade. For sure.
Well, that's why this strategic planning has to be proactive, not reactive.
Yes.
And that's the way I see what we need to be doing in everything from academics to everything else, just looking way ahead and being proactive, like that.
With your example, sorry.
I'm done.
Like, even for me, just looking at future, how do we quantify that? Because your daughter works in New York, even so she works here. So how does that with Lee County? How's industry? How do you really? That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. So
yeah,
you're not really looking at.
You mean like, for example, if the county was to incent remote workers to be here and like stay here or something like that? Is that like a
Or even you're looking at what are the industries in the county? Well,
right.
That's not really the industry. They're not working in the county, even though they are working.
There
in the
might
county.
not be being captured.
Yeah, like where is your
Do we have a
place?
pulse on the job growth where
Yeah.
remote
Yes.
workers could have those jobs but still stay here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, do we have a pulse, just
Yeah, yeah.
candidly, do we have a pulse on remote work?
Right.
Because there has been a huge cycle shift in the last year
That's his point.
with major corporations who are doing away with remote work. Tesla's brought everybody back to work. Zuckerberg's brought everybody back to work. There's no more working from home in those organizations. Blue Origin, one of the heavy lift rockets, Bezos,
No.
they're bringing people back because they've seen a drop in their productivity.
Yeah.
So I mean, while we're talking about that trend is already shifting, and that's to Arnor's point
some.
about proactivity, for some,
Yeah.
for some.
But you have to recognize it's there, so you gotta do both.
Right.
Yes,
You
it's a whole
can't-
new element that we
Right.
didn't have.
You can't assume everybody's
years
gonna
ago.
work from home. You can't assume that nobody's gonna work from home.
So if I can, we can look at this as a challenge, or we can look at it as an opportunity. And I see I see a place where it fits. As you know, we were selected as one of the 9 school districts across the country to work with the Carnegie Institute and the Learning Leadership Network. Hurricane put a hitch in our giddy up, no question about it. We lost October, November, December. We lost a couple of really great trips to look at some things. They rescheduled Phoenix on our behalf so that we could go out and look at graduates. And remember, our problem of action, or our problem of practice is about defining what is a Lee County graduate. And not just from our perspective, with the business community. So when you're talking about how do we involve the county commission, how do we bring in those other avenues? How do we involve business? How do we involve parents? That is part of the plan. Our goal in talking to, because they check in with us about every 2 months. Our goal in our last conversation, which was a week ago, was we are gonna come to the June Institute prepared with what we believe, just my internal little group, what we believe it is. We're gonna come, we promise we will come with that definition, but we will also come with a very clear set of action steps as to how we proceed next fall with parents, community members, businesses, and I'm adding local government to it because that wasn't, other than a couple of conversations about a public service academy with Roger DeCharlet. I really haven't had much other interaction with local government, because Roger and some of the other county governments are a great place for our kids to go to work. I mean, there's good jobs there. You may not start over 6 figures, but you're gonna potentially finish there. So there's some really interesting opportunities as we look at what a graduate is. Our perspective, the board's perspective, the community, parents, and then where do, can you go back one slide? Where do these fit into that? So this is really critical information for me to get back to my team who's working on that, to say this is a part of, because this reminds me, you talked about the love curriculum, I go back to Dorothy Rich and mega skills. These are the skills that, these will always be in our workplace. No matter where you work, no matter who you work with, you'll have to utilize each one of these buckets for something.
Some point in time.
There are no assembly line jobs anymore.
Well, even there, empathy and self-regulation, you know, and when they change that, how you put the hubcaps on, you gotta learn to learn.
I think, Dr. B, that's a nice pivot point to jump back into our next activity, and I think the conversation here, we've structured the morning so that we started a grain size pretty small. If you remember, our first question was about students, and think of a child within the district. We've slowly expanded that out. We've had some really high-level conversations, some really good ideas come up that Justin and I have put up in the parking lot. We want to end our morning going back to a little smaller grain size, so going back to students. And how we're going to structure that is it's an empathy activity for the most part. And what we're going to do is we want to start considering our learners in 4 different buckets. What are they thinking? Or here's the starting question here. What do you hope learners think? What do they see? So what do you hope learners see, feel, and do? And you'll see around the room we have 2 different workspaces. There is a workspace here, and we'll have a group over here, and there's a workspace over there, broken into these 4 categories. And so taking our conversation from this morning, taking all the data that we've talked about, even the data that you have in front of you here, trying to distill this down back to our learners, back to our main constituents and the reason why we're all here. And so the way we're going to structure this is we're just going to have potentially this side of the room, so 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll have kind of a group of 4 working collaboratively on this workspace. Everyone has Post-its available, and what we'll ask is potentially, you might have to separate some to share out, and then we'll have Sam, if you mind joining this group over here, like another group of 4. Well, we gotta be strategic with the room, it's like, yeah.
Could you give us a Patriots fan instead of a Giants fan?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm an Eagles fan, so that might spice it up.
Oh.
That's why everyone opposite ends of the room.
I think you guys just lost, didn't you?
Oh.
Sorry.
She's merciless.
I like it, that's really mindset. So this can be a collaborative time, it's really up to your group. If you also want to make this an independent and just jot some notes down, feel free to do that as well, totally up to you. We're gonna have a little gallery walk, but this time is for you and your group to jot some notes down.
It is.
Long beach side.
Sam in charge of the notes.
If you want me writing, no way. I write, my writing is worse than his.
Oh, great, thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
So I would not do anyone.
What do we think we all brainstorm and then put them up?
do what?
I think justice actually physically writing, my handwriting.
Well, we're supposed to write on Post-its anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so what do we all hope that students think?
And I will.
What do you hope
Am,
learners
will.
think? For some reason, the word globally is,
Think in regards to what?
I don't know, but for some
I know, that's
reason,
the problem.
the word
Yeah, think
globally
in
is coming
regards
to
to
my
what?
mind. I want them
Oh,
to think
in
beyond
regards to,
economic
so
growth.
as a result of their career,
As a result of their
their
careers.
career in the district, in the county, or in the district, what do you want to be true? So for example, right, thinking could be some of the skills from that previous slide, right? Or doing could be in relation to some of the jobs that we looked at, for example, or your example too, right? Like, I graduated, and I have like the skills and wherewithal to work from home, but for, you know,
I wanna see engagement.
good? Okay.
I need more coffee.
You want coffee? I can get coffee.
Oh, yes, he's fine. Yeah, with the teacher.
Think about people, we're back in this.
Well, I like my.
We got you,
You're globally,
For think, I'm sorry.
It's the excitement.
What you got going on over there, Jada?
well, no, I agree with you, I was gonna say outside the box, think outside the box.
Think different.
And that's different.
Just stealing from Apple.
Yes,
Can I just get out, we had some tape, so we just have to.
I'm ready.
oh,
Maybe this is.
I'll get you some.
I told you, I
See,
warned you,
they
but
can
in
achieve-
charge of this
They can
thing.
achieve
Yeah.
their goals.
Symbols.
well,
What did you think?
Differently outside the box, that's what they said.
Which
one?
Yeah. I like that. All right,
We're doing good, we got
Give
more
me, we can
stickers up
see it.
there.
analytically,
Yeah, okay.
I would like them to think critically and strategically.
yeah,
Yeah.
School commission meeting in the
Decisive.
Decisively.
Excited to learn.
Eagles pancakes.
Good, that I got your back.
Quoting off, yeah.
Confidently.
Yeah.
Do.
oh,
Okay, but how about
Slightly different.
feel
Engage.
that we see them? Well, that's my
Come to
thought.
school.
I mean,
But
they,
that we
they,
see
I
them.
hope they, you know,
Step one.
give them a great lesson.
Homework.
Because we're talking about students, right?
Hard work works.
No?
Well,
Are we-
as a result of your learners think, so you feel.
Yeah, learners.
What would you like them to see? I'd like them to see positive role models.
mhm.
Everything else about safety, so I
The
can,
end result,
I
what we
really
want to see.
possible.
The end
See the light at the end of the
Cares
tunnel,
for me and
basically.
Yeah.
See their,
Capable of
see their
accomplishing
future,
it.
See the future.
Want them to
Yeah.
think,
Their
On the
journey,
box.
see their, yeah, see that,
like,
Future journey, I got you.
Yeah.
their steps to,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think how to say it better.
yeah, what's the word,
I got it, I put journey,
Okay.
future.
Good.
yeah,
Safe learning environments.
Is that a feel?
What do we want them to see? We want them to see.
I mean, if
safe
we're
learning
on that
environments.
list, yeah.
listed, we want them to, that's
Feel empathy. You can want them to feel it, I want them to see it.
I want to see a kid happy.
We can put it in both.
Okay.
yeah, they need to see it to be able to feel it.
Right.
If you don't,
Love.
They need to see it and then we want them to feel safe.
well, we go back to the kindergarten.
So then they need to
story.
see.
Yeah, we want
You see
them
that
to
night,
feel
they
safe.
drag themselves in by.
We want them to feel cared for,
Yeah.
is that nurtured?
cared for and nurtured.
SAT or something.
maybe happy to come to school.
Yeah, we can,
You gotta add happy to come to school, not just happy,
Confident.
Yeah,
in themselves.
happy in their school environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm, so that's.
Do we?
Yeah, here, because we see them happy to come to school, enthusiasm, so.
secure, that's back to safety, but if you're secure within yourself, you will not, you'll still be strong in what you do, like,
Yeah. well, and-
Yeah.
I'm writing.
Oh, Chris, are with
I
that?
mean, I'd like to see them give back to the community.
What about
in a
two?
way, you know, whether it be,
Sports,
whether it be
extracurriculars.
service or
Serve.
serve community.
proactive. I was gonna say think proactive, but if you're proactive, it's what you do as well. I mean, acting proactive,
Community involvement. Sorry.
yes, no, that's
Set up.
serving,
All of
serving,
it, 100%.
service.
What do we want?
What
This
we
is
do
my.
to help others achieve their goals.
So that's their plan.
In their own learning, take responsibility for our own learning, engagement.
I would like them to stay drug, alcohol, and sex free, but I don't know if that's realistic.
Can all fall into
Yeah.
place, you know?
You're gonna put that on there.
I'm starting to shift my mind from elementary school to like.
Don't, you cover pre-K to 5.
That's right. Be an example.
All help.
That's good.
612.
That's a good one, that's a good one.
There's a reason why there's a post-it note on my community screen that says elementary.
Because then they can send it back to the next one. They pay it forward.
Actually, how about this leading?
So now we have to
If you're
talk
a
about
doer,
should have
leader, being a leader,
Middle school or junior high,
we want them to be,
something about putting sixth
What's the word I
graders.
want to say?
Those sixth graders just.
I know I taught 1 year.
They never fit at the beginning of the
Phase
year.
school.
Go now. They fit
I hope that they
I've
graduate.
They are
taught
sixth
How
graders
about
or something.
and they had only built a 6th grade unit, and they were gonna do
Sure,
7th
but-
and 8th.
You guys
trying to think about
This
it.
year, because
You're in
6th
the
grade
first
all by
percent.
themselves.
Like June, seventh, eighth,
yeah, I was
ninth.
thinking, yeah,
Those
like,
ninth
well,
graders
it's
just
aggressive,
So
not,
helping.
not
So
big,
they
but
got
like,
that
but-
They're not big
You know, successful.
Right,
So you leave dinner at 7, I don't
well,
think you guys.
you're successful, if you're secure.
Whatever.
If you're secure, you're gonna be
Middle
successful.
school and high
Are you
school.
talking about fulfillment?
Oh.
I got on the
Success,
bus.
not
Yeah.
fulfilling. Is
Yeah.
that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
With high school seniors.
Yeah.
I sat in the front of the bus and they sat in the back.
Confident,
You slowly worked your way back over.
They told me that
Oh,
we did it,
yeah.
so I wrote it down. It said there was-
oh, okay, yeah, okay, that's
6,
feeling.
7,
Yeah.
12.
But
Yeah,
I feel like if you're
First or sixth.
A lot of these are all crossovers.
Yeah, that's-
So, I mean, they could be in multiple places.
What else do we
They're on
want
a
to
football
see?
team and everything else.
Yeah, but
Junior
see,
high's are
right.
good.
Maybe you want them to feel that
their future, they need to see their future, if they, if.
Role models?
we want them to think
Yeah,
See
yeah,
others.
that they're educators.
We have role
You know what I
models
mean?
up there.
We have role models up there?
but some kids have no idea, like, they can be
Experiences.
something without see, they need to be able to see it, the ability to.
But like I said, a lot of
What,
them are
say that again, Annalise?
Yeah.
See others, see perspective.
Yeah,
See others, so.
Like their perspective, others' perspective.
So that would be empathetic.
See, I,
But it's just like,
So we want them to feel empathetic.
give me another
Yeah.
sense to like talk about it. Because we build it different.
When I think about what I want them to see, I want them to walk into a school and not feel like it's from the 1970s. I want it to be a modern environment that is clean and
Acceptance.
but that has to be the building,
they're
you're talking
having
about,
fun. I'm
that,
not
that's the
doing-
environment, your environment.
You want to feel that they're accepted wherever they go into?
Right, like modern, is that?
You sound
But you're saying
more
the
like
environment.
one or
That's
two
the
minutes.
environment.
You sound more like you than I do.
That,
Do I
is
really?
reflected
Oh, I
in
wanna
the
be
way
with
that
them,
we
that's
are
actually
working.
fun.
So
But
it's not
that's your
sitting in
environment, that's-
rows, it's sitting in
That can tell you,
work
Yes.
groups and,
Innovation.
yeah,
you could be in an old school or a new school, which one do you
a
want to be?
mix of
Doesn't matter, what makes you feel good.
individual work and.
If I walk into anything
I like
and
new,
I
clean,
I have,
brand
I
new,
innovative,
innovative,
they don't
Innovative.
accept me for
It said,
whoever.
Okay.
2
Innovative,
times,
innovative.
4 times 6.
Yeah, you want
record
them
player.
to be innovative.
That's how you took your.
Innovation.
That, yeah, see, I wouldn't have you see that.
I remember.
That's like,
Oh my
okay, look at, okay, here's my,
That's how-
No, I didn't write it down.
Chris is right.
Oh, okay.
okay. I'm thinking of Walt Disney. He had to be, he had to think, see, vision, feel, he, look at
Yeah,
all
I saw
he-
that.
To be
Going going back to the graph.
vision.
I know, I'm trying to go back to what we saw.
Because how did he know he
Well,
could do what he
I
did and has done?
Well, he's on ice, you can ask him.
I know they don't
But it
answer.
wasn't, it wasn't
He just did it.
And they,
What
well,
we
they say
think
he's
is
very
important,
visionary.
they
I
don't
mean,
He was a vision, yeah,
you know.
that's what he did.
well, that's why I was trying to see about the seed thing.
Don't
That's
see
what
it. Oh, you're not working with them.
He looked way beyond,
way beyond.
and then he did it. Whether it was right or wrong, he did it.
He sure did.
Now I got Mickey Mouse.
Uh-huh.
So if you want to take about another 30 seconds, add anything else to your group's page, we're gonna move, don't take a seat just yet, because we are gonna do a little strategic shift here. So we can look at other people's.
Gallery.
What's that?
Yeah,
We're very broad, I don't know. we supposed to be this
Well, I think the questions are broad.
Yeah, that's it.
So
Brian's
for,
like,
I think
oh,
we're good.
yeah, you all are good. For the next part, we want to do, we be strategic, given the small room. All you'll need for this is a pen or pencil or marker. And we'll just want group 1 to move this way,
Group 1,
head to group 2's board, and then group 2, you're just gonna rotate.
just say.
Which way we're going?
Lockstep.
Which way we're all going now?
Yep,
Just say it.
and we're gonna spend a couple minutes.
We're going this way?
Yep, and just mark.
Not just the groups move.
It's a hard concept.
Mark what?
Anything that's resonating with you, anything that stands out, you just put a +1 or a star.
Here, I got it.
Oh, what's wrong?
Here,
What are we supposed to do?
What are,
that
Plus
stands,
one is the
that
check mark.
stands out, that we like, what you
Or
said.
resonates with you,
Resonates,
yeah,
so
or connected to what
mark
you're
it,
doing.
Chris. With our marker in
A
that
lot
one.
of repetitive.
This resonates with me, critical thinker.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like this though. There's another.
Outside the box.
Yeah. Me too.
Someone at school cares, we have that.
Supposed to do this year with the freshman class is by October, evaluate what group they belong to. If they don't,
you
find
have
one.
goals and two
Right.
goals too.
And if they don't like that one at the end of the semester, you
Right.
find them another one.
They're working on the right stuff, that to me is a movie about space.
I'm glad it says extracurricular, not just
Is
athletics.
this
Care.
bad that I thought the same thing?
Yeah, we've got care again.
When I heard right stuff.
Isn't that a movie?
Yes.
Engagement, that's a,
Sam enthusiasm, mentors, teachers, care,
I feel
again,
like
genuine about future goals,
we
we
should
have
have thrown
that.
there.
I think somebody heard
Why are
somebody
you
talking over there.
yeah. Stole that.
They cheated.
Happy, happy, I mean, this is not, everyone happy to be happy.
Yes.
I got to see him happy, yeah, I got to.
Just not
When
in my
people see
experience.
happy, if you're unhappy,
But
You
is
see
this
happy-
us seeing that?
that's
or
like the
them
smile.
seeing that?
That's like
Who's
the-
seeing
This is
that?
what
Okay.
they see.
This is what
Debbie,
they
remember the
see.
thing they had us do at that conference?
Oh,
Okay,
really?
each other
They totally
and not
copy
smile.
us.
That's fun.
Yeah, they still
Also, yeah, any similarities too, you can mark under
Graduate,
connections you see between.
accomplish goals,
what you will put.
engage
Oh.
in responsible
Well, I like
lifelong
this.
learning,
We
we
didn't
didn't have
have
that.
this.
Hard
We
work
liked
works.
this
I would say hard work pays off.
We want them to contribute, we want them to actual care and
Yeah.
respect.
This one was a 100. We both.
It's so funny.
We
that
want
came
them to
back
feel
and
safe, loved,
Yeah,
and engaged. We
yeah.
want them all getting married.
Not that type of engagement.
Got it. We want them to feel
Tough battles
very-
around.
No, this is like Star Trek, engage.
Excited to learn and participate, prepared for life.
I like, yeah.
I think we got
Actual, does that say cave?
I know,
Care.
scared.
I know, I have to listen to
Do
it.
actual care and respect, you put it in a sentence.
I got a
How do you
video.
do
They're
that?
gonna ask career.
All right, everyone, if you wanna take another minute, and then we can do clockwise turn back.
That's
I told Kristen,
That's
is there a comment? Is there a
I
comment?
want you to see that.
Was there a comment
Or
there?
did we?
Time is up. Oh, you feel more
I
alive?
have you now.
You're going back.
Which way we go?
Never mind.
Let's work together.
I've got it memorized.
Rule follower, I like
Darth
Right.
Vader.
Breakfast.
You're gonna have lunch in a minute. You just.
Thanks.
Oh, no, he didn't order, so.
I did ours.
Are those the cheeses?
Who wants our kids getting married before the age of 18?
Not that type of engagement.
Are we sitting back?
Will they not live at home? What do you think about that? Or they bring them to you?
Like, where am I, where am I
I'm so
supposed to?
sorry.
Get 'em out sooner.
Keep track, yeah.
Nothing.
Lisa, do we have any more calls?
Huh?
All right, folks, let's take lunch is on its way. We're gonna do a quick debrief. We're gonna break, lunch should be here by then. If not, we'll come back together for 15 to 20 minutes max, and just continue to be efficient at our time. All right, so we dove into think, see, feel, do. Just curious, what's kind of at the top of your mind after that activity? What's resonating with you either across what you saw from the different posters, or just what's something that's really sticking with you?
They copied us.
The copy.
We did, we
It's
saw,
a good problem,
we saw a lot of copying.
okay?
Well, what we think and what we see is what we do.
Right.
You know,
That's good.
well,
That's true.
you think confident and then you do what confident people do.
Did you not highlight any of ours?
No.
No, we didn't like them.
Put a smiley face up there.
Put 100 on graduate.
I wanna
100.
feel
Okay.
appreciated.
Was there anything that surprised you, or is there anything like as you're looking, you know what, we didn't think about X
We didn't think about globally.
globally?
I
Okay.
liked that.
And we
It's
didn't,
Chris's too.
And
We didn't-
extracurricular.
You did one.
we didn't think about happy.
Yeah, we were,
Okay.
yeah.
And
Well-
that's what I wrote, that I wanted my kid to be.
Well, and I reminded, we just went to a conference and they had the whole room look at one person, one
Okay.
person, and one smile the whole time and the other one not smile at all, and to control that. And it's very difficult to do, to keep, if someone's smiling at you, you generally wanna smile back, and you can't control it, it's very, and that was their point, is if people are happy, smiling, you're gonna have more people happy and smiling,
That is true,
so,
though.
Chris, you're right.
That's free.
Yes,
It was free.
right.
Smiles and no smiles.
Well, the conference wasn't, that was just my answer.
Sure, fair enough. Okay. Well, the reason we do this too is really like a synthesis step, and also after lunch, or potentially before, it should arrive in a minute again, we're gonna get into mission, vision, values, reflection, right? So just grounding us in what you want to be true for the learners that you support and that you serve across the district is the crux of it, of course, right? So for the Education Elements team, Chris and I, we'll be taking this back and synthesizing. And then also, we're gonna ask you to kind of come back to these as you reflect on mission and vision, right? And like potentially adapting it. So that's the role of these posters, okay? So with that, let's take 10. We'll bring you back together. If lunch isn't here by then, we're gonna keep rolling, again, to be respectful of and efficient with our time. But hopefully it will arrive, and that's it. So we'll see you back at 12:15.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your patience. As soon as it gets here, we'll break and we'll have our lunch break. And for the time being, we'll keep working through and pushing through. And so now we're gonna shift gears and get really more into the actual components of the refreshed strategic plan. Today, again, is really about discussion, right? Sharing ideas. We're not finalizing anything, but definitely shaping. Okay. And with that, we're going to get into talking about strategic direction, which is essentially vision. What's the future that we want to create? The posters are certainly a part of it. What we didn't think about with the posters is, what do we want to be true for families? What do we want to be true for staff? What do we want to be true in the community, right? When students are back in the community, in the workforce. So that's where our vision comes in, right, in our mission, which is why our organization exists. So what does it look like? Why does it exist? And then our values. What matters to us? What are the beliefs that guide us, right, when times get tough or when times are good and we're making decisions about the future? Okay? So to start, consider the current vision and mission of the current strategic plan. The question for the group that I have is, are we doing these? How do we know? Are we doing these? How do we know? Where are we seeing the data that shows yes, like these are the things that are helping us to be world class. These are the indicators that are telling us that students are achieving their potential. So go ahead and turn and talk, and then we're going to have you share a couple highlights from your conversations.
I'll ask a question. Are students world class?
We have some students who are.
Some not.
Each decision, we try to do that.
I think the vision should be.
To know if we are
system, but,
meeting that vision.
Well,
like, if
this
I
means you
look
want it to
at
be
the
the best
opportunities our kids have
it
here
can be, I
in
mean,
Lee County,
compared
and I
to other
compare it to
schools.
the
So, I
opportunities
mean,
my
I
kids
think
had in New York.
when we make decisions,
There
that's
is no
our
comparison. Lee County is
focus.
light
Now,
years
whether
ahead.
we succeed in that world,
There was no IB, there was no AD, there was no development, there was none of the rigorous high-level programs that exist in New York, and yet we weren't straight with their parents. So,
But I don't think that we do.
Teachers are able to get to that point.
they have,
yeah, right now,
How we get each student.
we don't have all
The fact that
the
there are so many students.
personnel
and not
needed.
enough teachers.
I'm not saying we're doing
well,
all
that
for
played
years.
out here, right?
Yes.
And you know,
But
a
I
lot of it's
thought
up to
that
the
There's some
person.
interest on
a decent number of students
There's a lot.
But I think we have the framework of the
different tools to help me learn
Yeah,
about
to
the
see.
like math lessons and
community technical college, and then the, I think,
And
all
each student
the
is different, right?
advanced programs
So their
we have.
potential could be different.
lessons that were
I
changed
think
between
they're there.
84% elementary.
Okay, but so,
Yeah, I mean, I think we have the framework to do it.
There's a lot of distractions.
Yeah.
So who's regulating?
Help
Do
guide
you know what I'm saying? So we have to figure
Yeah.
out from years that your child might have, or her child, all our kids have a different perspective as far as what is the highest
And
achievement
that's
they're gonna
the
get. So we always wanna
Yeah.
put that every
We have the
child.
framework, but we could do a better job.
Other
Whatever that
nations
ability is, but
lead their
how,
first
first of all,
staffing,
figure
our
out what that is,
policy.
Right.
and then how do we get them
Make
to
it
that?
happen. You're right.
And are we doing that?
So it's more
Our
change
goal
on
is not to
Which is a
track.
great
Okay, I'm
savings.
resigning now, I'm sorry.
When I said
Yeah.
child. But I'm saying, does that,
No,
are we doing that?
We
I
have to.
don't know.
Because
You didn't
some
make
of
it.
COVID.
I don't know, I feel like that
And
black
hurricane.
guides what we do.
Being in our ability
We're
to
required to be
do.
individualized.
And
It's
also,
just a-
Guidance, it's the mission, it doesn't mean it's
Meeting
learning.
at least 40
Yeah.
kids. That's why some of the church.
Because it's the vision and the mission, just, we're not,
Can
we
you go
haven't.
back a slide?
Yeah.
people
No, wait a minute.
working multiple jobs.
This one?
Yeah.
That
Flip.
all plays in it.
Why our organization exists, it's not,
Feeling when they come to school.
so can you go forward again?
Sure.
please?
Yeah.
Our
Does the mission
organization
change?
exists for the purpose of ensuring that each
Yeah.
student
Yeah.
achieves their.
All right.
So if you look at it in terms of what the mission is supposed to be,
Yeah, then it would be.
or what a mission is.
So let's
So you're not part of our group.
Well, I
let's
think,
bring the
I
conversations
think, I
up.
think we just opened up. I think
Yeah,
you just
we just
started.
opened up.
We
Good
just
job.
started.
Same group. Let's bring our conversations and reflections, out to everybody. So what came up in your conversations about vision and mission, what extent we're doing these, how do we know?
Chris, you started
Yeah.
I find it odd that the word student doesn't exist in our vision. Find it odd that we're focused on the system instead of the child. And what is world-class, I don't know, but
Yeah.
when you look at the educational opportunities that were available for my children in New York, and you compare them to what's available here in Lee County, there is no comparison. There was no IB, there was no AP, there was no ACE, there was no, those high-level rigorous college preparatory programs did not exist.
Okay.
And you had to go to a different school to get any kind of career
Yes.
training. It wasn't
Have access to
integrated
that.
in the high schools.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so
vocational schools.
so we're challenging and wondering, what do we mean by world-class? Where are students in the vision, right? Okay, I saw some head nodding too. Other ideas, other things that came up.
That's what we were discussing, was first of all, we need to decide what is the definition of a world-class school system, to know whether or not we're meeting that vision. We had
Right.
mentioned the same thing, even though we weren't in the same group, believe it or not. So, but yeah, I think that the student, that, you know, all of us came to the table here today because the student should be the focus, and that should be in our vision, and it should be part of our mission.
Can you go back, please,
Back
one more,
to this one?
to tell us what a vision is?
Yep.
The vision is the future we're hoping to create. Okay, thank you.
I think we have a pretty good vision because we have a great framework for, like you say, for all the advanced programs, for all the technical programs. Are we doing a good job between the pandemic, the hurricane, disciplinary problems we were talking about? We could do better, there's no doubt about that. So I think we're falling short of that. But I really do like the framework our district has. When I go to all these conferences and talk to other schools, they're not even close, even in safety and everything else. We have a great framework.
Other thoughts? Okay. So, yes, Dr. Graham.
So, to Jana's point about a world-class school system, I see it two ways. First of all, that particular statement regarding the future, I think, is very doable from the aspect of what we're searching for, because school systems should do two things really well, and they're related to each other. One is they should graduate students that are both college and career ready. But if we truly get to a world-class school system, you've heard me say this before with other organizations, that we get to the point where businesses and other people want to come here because there's a system present that attracts them as a mother, a father, as an employee of another organization. I wasn't here when one of the corporations that were known for having made its transition, but one of the struggles that organization had trouble in coming here was convincing their employees that their students' education was going to be as good as where they came from.
You say that's true, but that has never been datatized for me. I have never seen the data on that. My next door neighbor works there. My next door neighbor can't, so anecdotally, it's not true, and I have said to realtors, and I have said to community leaders in that area, show me the data to prove that.
Yeah,
And I've never gotten the proof.
It's the anecdotal
It's just
data
one of
that's
those
shared
things
with
that
a new
bothers me
resident.
about living there.
Yeah, it was shared with me as a realtor. Several people, they want to, there's kids go to school in Naples, they want to buy in Naples versus, and they looked in Fort Myers, and they chose Naples
I've heard that.
or Bonita,
But that's anecdotal.
you
That's
know.
not data.
So.
Anyways, keep going.
So that is a piece of, I think that is the future we want to create, where our kids are able to walk out into the world either locally or wherever they'd like to go spend their lives and be really great human beings, but also that it's an attractor for our community for its economic engine. That we have really great kids that can be employed easily, and we have employers looking at our environment and saying, boy, I'd really like to move down to Fort Myers. There's another version of that. So world class, that means Finland, Sweden, France, who weed a population as they move forward. right? They,
Yeah.
not everybody gets to the same outcome in other world-class organizations.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
What I'm missing, one of the metrics I'd like to add just to try to muddy the waters any more deeply. So graduation rate, but also the metrics, I think if we're really gonna be a world-class system, one of the metrics we need to start tracking is the number of students who graduate both with a high school diploma and an AS or AA. That to me that's a goal or a standard that approaches a world-class system.
It's funny, because I was thinking dual enrollment, we don't focus on that too much. We let the schools kind of do it, and it's not done really that well.
We also
Because they're
don't,
doing other things.
we also don't free up enough of the middle school schedule to get students there. There's a real, when you talk about acceleration points that came up earlier today, we have to do something about accelerating our middle school students, actually our elementary school students and then our middle school students, so that when they get to high school, they come in with credits that are already finished. Because then they have the space to do some of the additional dual enrollment and some of the space that the seniors right now don't have, which is why they don't like a 7-period day. Our juniors feel also slighted. You talk to our freshmen, they don't care because they haven't known anybody.
Yeah.
I have a question for you though. Is there a way to do dual enrollment that doesn't require 16, 17, 15, 16, 7-year-old kids to be on a college campus?
There are, you just have to certify, the universities don't have enough people to kick out to us. So you have to certify your staff
Yeah.
So my point is,
for the appropriate.
if we could expand those opportunities for our kids without putting them in age-inappropriate environments, which is on college campuses.
But we already do that in
I
some
think
of our
we're likely to
schools,
support it.
correct?
Yeah, but he's talking about expansion of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So-
Like my IB program, my daughter graduated with over a year's college credit.
Right.
But they're
Which
actually
never
doing
left
dual
Fort Myers.
enrollment at the high schools.
Yeah.
Collegiate, the charter school, they have an associate's degree before they go on to college, so they have less, some go on to school longer, but I mean, they have that opportunity.
Oh, Benito.
What I'm hearing from, just listening to you from the group is a couple of things. Like first, yes, defining world class with Dr. Bernier, you're starting to push into that and kind of say, well, these are the things that could begin to tell us whether or not we are, right? What are the metrics?
I think if we understood what we want to accomplish, we
Right.
might back into a
Into that.
definition of world class.
Right. Right, so for example, like you're pushing on metrics a bit, which is like, okay, well, where are students getting jobs? Who, what programs are students enrolling in, right? What career trajectories is it positioning them to be on? Which could, to your point, help us to back into what we mean by world class. By the way, lunch is here, it's getting set up, so I'm gonna have you do one reflection before we go eat as that's getting set up, okay? Which is, and then we'll come back and we'll round this out, but while we're like very much present in mission and vision, let's just do this 5 minutes on our own. We won't come back and talk about it just yet, we'll go break for lunch. So take a few minutes. We've already started to do this, some of you already started jotting down notes. How might we refresh our mission and vision, right? So just writing statements, I'll go back to them, okay? This is beginning to wordsmith a bit here, right? So I'll go back to them, take a couple minutes to do that.
No, the other one.
Go to this one?
That one.
Okay.
I'll take a picture and then you can move it to
Great.
where everybody else wants it. Thank you.
You want to go back to these. Maybe I should be careful here, but I told you there was gonna be one of these moments where I remember we're refreshing,
We're refreshing. Right.
so that,
And if you say, you could also say something like, well, we can leave them, and through our work defining priority areas, we want to be clear on, how does it align up to the idea of world class? Like, where are we drawing connections? That's fine, right? We don't need to change any of the words if you don't feel like that's necessary. if you could write somewhat legibly, because we do want to collect these. My apologies. And put it on post-its so we can collect these from you. The reason why is because we want to just write them up in case we do want to make any changes. We want to be able to share that back with you and share that with the different groups that we mentioned earlier.
Dr. Leon, can you go back to the same slide again one more time? Sorry.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Said it didn't get an email, but that's not true. We get a network security key per guest.
Yes. And
So that way,
sounds around.
it was right in front of me.
Yeah, that's it.
Not that my board members can't tell me what's going on.
And when you're finished, your food is waiting. When we come back from lunch, we will revisit these ideas, we'll talk about them, then we'll move into values, and then we'll move into identifying initial priority areas to round out the day. Okay?
All right, and before you go to lunch, if you want a Dunks, text me what kind you want.
What?
Dunks,
Dunks.
the copy of the New England Patriots. On Mondays when we won, which was often, they sold coffee at 87 cents a cup to celebrate Gronk. Just
Not in 2007.
No, it's not really.
read between the lines.
If
Those were
you
great years.
remember what you ordered, it's on the table out here. And so all.
I don't know, if I see something I like better.
Yeah,
exactly.
First come, first served.
Yeah.
Hang on, hang on,
People do that.
hang on, so we're gonna talk about that.
Right.
We're on break.